We needed chickens out. I didn't have time to get it.
Plan this Eugene, you can just put on the camera, make up on one
Hey
side.
Carter, how you going?
I saw Captain Durris on you and Red Roseanne.
It used to be so much more obvious than it is now. You run into politicians and news guys just walking around in broad daylight.
Yeah.
We look like dolls.
I've seen
We've had some,
I was.
it's gotten better.
Yeah.
I just had
I was
one
sitting
with
here,
them.
so I
while,
didn't have a
very
chance to say
overdone.
hi.
Even for the TV.
Yeah, in fact, I flew up in the state of Florida.
Nice.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for coming tonight, and we are ready to begin our meeting. It's 5:30, so we'll start with the first item, agenda review. I'll turn it over to Carter. If you would go through that first, please.
Tonight we have an agenda that looks strikingly similar to the December agenda because we canceled the December meeting. The changes from this meeting compared to the preceding meeting are the agenda date. So what we're going to be doing is going through the videotaping policy, which you have seen before, and are seeking action on that. The what used to be stops data policy is now called professional police contacts policy, and have continued the discussion with that. That is a 65-minute agenda item. Review the minutes from November, and Chief Kearns may not make it. Tonight is the state of the city from the city of Springfield, and he's going to that and coming to this. So Captain Durr is here in his stead until he arrives or doesn't. And then the last item is to talk about the item that the Police Commission added to its work plan at its May retreat called racial profiling, which is different than the department's work on its policy, and we just need to find out what it is you all want to do with that work item. And conclude with commission comments.
Thank you. Questions about the agenda? All right, then we'll turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Tamara and let her, as our guest appear, that would like to speak.
I have two speakers signed up today. I have Carol Burke-Caldwell, followed by Jessica C. Green. If you wish to speak and you don't have it turned into blue zip, they're over here on the side. Hi. Hey there. You know the...
I do, I know the routine, I think.
Thank you. A few minutes.
Okay. Carol Burke-Caldwell, 2510 Augusta. I'm a volunteer with ICON Independent Court Observers Network. Happy New Year, Commissioners. It's show and tell time for my public comment tonight and a gifting ceremony, which I hope that your deserving staffer, Ms. Holly, can accept. This painting of bridges I found at Goodwill, and it symbolizes goodwill and the bridge building skills that you already know Ms. Holly deploys so professionally. However, perhaps you are not as familiar with her accomplishments as designated EPD liaison for me and my colleague, Jessica C. Green with ACT, A Community Together, when we raise questions, suggestions, and other input pertinent to EPD policies, practices, procedures. We often confer and invariably gain broader understandings as a result. It's that bridge building skill of Carter's. Recently, Carter informed me about encouraging steps that EPD and court are pursuing, a meeting plan to include Lieutenant Doug Mozan, a Muni Court judge, I assume the presiding judge, other court reps to study EPD's excellent new, relatively, Vehicle Compliance Program, BCP, also known as Fix-It Tickets. While I often hear court clients express appreciation in open court that the citing officer had indeed given them the VCP brochure at time of citing, there have also been too frequent court comments from those who responded to judges' inquiries that they hadn't received a brochure or even verbal notice from the officer allegedly. Commendably, judges then allowed more time for court clients to get a brochure, fix the violation, obtain EPD confirmation of the fix. Court client then returns to the court yet again, so violation can be dismissed off the record, no fine imposed, though $50 admin fee needed, much less than the potential full fine. So I was so glad to hear from Carter about this planned meeting. I expect appropriate corrective, perhaps even reparative measures will result, for I believe that all known participants of this planned meeting are also bridge builders seeking results that will reflect and uphold Eugene's community values. So yes, while there have been some hiccups in this VCP matter, it's typical in new programs, the fact remains that Officer Greg Magnus's idea to adopt VCP was and is a sterling gem which EPD implemented. And I will bet that Officer Magnus surely had bridge building in his mind too. For VCP is indeed potentially all of that. Carter, I thank and salute you for the bridge building you do for community and your department. I appreciate the patience and understanding that you bring to your tasks. You don't need to hang this artwork to serve as a reminder of the value of building strong bridges, because you have got that down pat. So just enjoy it. And ODOT might just try to steal you away, and that would be our loss, their gain. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is for you, my dear.
Next, we have Majeska C. Screen.
Hello.
Majeska.
I just want to second what Carol said, how much I also appreciate Carter's role, and just the fact that the chief appointed her to be a liaison for me and my nonprofit work, and then for Carol and what she does with ICON, Independent Court Observers Network. And there's some other departments in the city that I wish would do something similar. It's really relatively easy to, for people like me to communicate back and forth with the police department because of the good work that Carter does in that position. And sometimes we feel bad for all the time of hers that we take, but we try to keep it to a minimum. But I also want to mention how much Carol does of this bridging that she's referred to. She's such a bridge between community at municipal court and a number of the other departments in the police department, and with Act Two. And she and I do some things kind of as a team. Tweedledee, Tweedledum sometimes we call it. But it's really neat to work with somebody like Carol who's so oriented that way, trying to bridge between different divides. And I appreciate that your chair is going to make a motion for the minutes correction that I requested. And I'm going to get some follow-up in on one of the things I mentioned way back in November, but I think I'll do that by way of email and ask Carter to include that when you're writing packets for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Lily Parker.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am going to be fast to try and stay within my 3 minutes parameter here. The Anti-Racial Profiling Committee of LULAC, Blaine County, respectfully presents the following issues, concerns, questions, and recommendations to the Police Commission for your consideration. Overall concern, the Anti-Racial Profiling Committee has the general concern that within Policy 402, there is no parameters set around police behavior that can assure communities of color and their citizens equal protection under the law. Throughout the policy, the power to define, document, report, and address bias in police contacts resides solely within the discretion of the Eugene Police Department. Section 402.2 policy issue. Within this section, it is unclear the parameters around which the police department will define areas of high crime and what constitute suspicious persons and circumstances. As such, as a policy, communities of color cannot view whether the proactive actions of the police department within these definitions truly protect the constitutional rights of citizens of color and assure equal protection under the law. The above policy concern is reflected in the following subsections. Section 402.4.1, detentions concerns. Within this section, there is nothing stated in the policy that defines reportable contact with citizens of color. The policy is vague, stating nothing in this policy requires an officer to document a contact that would otherwise not require reporting. The only examples of documentable contact is custody report or uniform traffic citations. There are many other forms of police contact with citizens of color wherein bias may be the sole motive of contact that will possibly not be deemed reportable with such vagueness. For example, a young black or Latino male jogging at night wearing a hoodie-type shirt. If a police officer stopped this young man to ask him questions, where would this instance fall in requiring police to document that contact? As the policy stands, it doesn't appear there is a requirement to document this type of detention. Issue: what are the parameters around how the Eugene Police Department defines a reportable contact? Is it possible that a majority of bias-based police contact will occur in the domain of unreportable contacts? Recommendation: it is recommended that the Eugene Police Department within this policy provide greater clarity and detail in how the department currently delineates reportable from non-reportable contacts, such that community of color can assist the department in potentially expanding their definition of reportable contact wherein bias takes place. Without such clarity and community input, instances of racial bias in detention may occur that will never be documented. Section 4024.4.1, detention concerns. This subsection goes on to state that if an officer is informed or perceived from a contact that the person believe they have been stopped, searched, or arrested based upon bias by the officer should immediately notify a sworn supervisor and politely refer the person stopped to the responding supervisor. Issue: where is the assurance to the person of color who is detained that the officer will self-report their own bias to a supervisor through their own perceptions of bias towards the individual, or will report the citizen's stated concerns around bias? If, as noted above under 402.4.1, many types of contacts are not deemed reportable, what assurance are there that police will report these instances of perceived or citizen-announced bias during a detention?
Ms. Parker, your time is up. Sorry.
Can I just read the final note?
Sure.
The LULAC Anti-Racial Profiling Committee supports the Eugene Police Department in keeping our community safe. Those who commit crimes, regardless of community affiliation, should be held accountable. However, there is a history wherein innocent people of color has been detained by police for non-criminal reasons, wherein racial bias is the predominant impetus for detainment. We believe that we can work together to open up the police contact system, its recording, reporting, and summarizing, such that people of color will have a voice and can stop saying, we talk and talk, but nothing ever changes. Relative to racial profiling, greater clarity and detail around parameters and definitions used in recording and reporting systems, and allowing the community to help shape these aspects is critical to making positive changes in community of color relationships with the police. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And I do have copies if you would like copies.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment portion of our meeting. I'd like to turn the time back over to Bob.
Thank you.
Who wants another copy?
Thank you.
I'll scan it and email it to everyone.
Okay,
Oh, we'll
that'd be
scan it and
great.
email it now.
I'll scan it and email it to everyone tomorrow.
So now-
And you can pass it out too, I'm
Okay,
just saying.
if you wanted it.
Thank you all for your public comments, and we're moving into the commissioners' responses and concerns at this time, so if anybody has any comments or concerns, please start here at this end. Joe, would you like to start?
Thanks. I didn't get her name when I came in.
Lily Parker.
Lily Parker. Yeah, I wanted to, Lily, I want to thank you for your comments. I thought they were really outstanding.
Thank you.
Yeah, and one thing that's sort of been brought to my attention, and again, something to consider. There's been a number of claims that, this was an issue for me at the Occupy camp 2 years ago, but there's been a number of claims that the police are dropping hard cases off at homeless camps that are around the city. And the perceived intent by the people talking about this is that by putting these people on the site, it will disrupt the operations and cause the sites to fail. So whether that's certainly not a written policy, but unwritten policies are as powerful as anything else. And so again, I would hope that people would look at that as to whether it is in fact happening. It's not all officers who are doing that, but some of them apparently are. And a number of people have brought that to my attention, so I wanted to raise it here as an issue that maybe people will consider. Thank you. And Happy New Year, everybody.
Notes from our Citizens Review Board did meet last month with the snow. No accidents, no deaths. What they talked about was, actually we had the public health officer came in and talked about the work that they're doing to keep disease under control in the homeless camps. And some of the stuff I had absolutely no idea that went on, that like, you can't have food in your tent, you should have it off the floor, sanitary things. So it was a real interesting talk, and I didn't realize, as a lot of things in life, all the work that's done along that line. Thank you.
I just want to thank all of our speakers. I appreciate them coming tonight and wish everybody a Happy New Year.
Okay. Well, happy 2014, everyone. It's been a while since we've been together at the table and stuff. Just kind of catch you up on what I've been doing. Of course, I attended the State of the City last night and stuff. I see you decided to take on and put a shirt and tie on instead of your uniform today, so that's nice. I had a meeting under my other hat as far as the chair of the Oregon Commission of Black Affairs. We met Monday with the state's Attorney General and her staff, and we talked about an array of items and issues and stuff. Some was based on the growing, as they phrase it, anarchy that's down in southern Oregon, Josephine County for one. There is no current plan because of budgeting and things like that. However, they do have a civil rights section that has not been manned, which is being in the process of being manning right now. So if there's anyone that has would like to file a civil rights complaint, all they have to do is go to the State Attorney General's webpage, and the form is on there. One of the reasons why the Attorney General does not get involved with a lot of things, because there are no ones filing complaints. Generally, what they do with the complaints is that they will refer those complaints back to the source and find out what's going on with the source. If they need to intervene because of inactions at that source, then they will do so. They do have an investigative team as well. We are looking to meet with other advocacy chairs and vice chairs with the governor later on this month. And we're going to be talking to him about some of the same issues. We're talking about profiling. We're talking about diversity issues and things like that. So there is a broader conversation that's going on at higher levels as well.
Don't have anything right now.
Some of you may already know that I'm on the planning team for the city for the Neighborhoods USA conference. It's here in May. That's where they hand out the Neighborhood of the Year awards. And it's an annual national event Eugene has been bidding on for years, and although neighborhoods here have won awards, the city has not been successful until this year in getting the event brought here. And one of the things that it involves is workshops and tours in the neighborhoods and around the city of all different kinds of aspects of neighborhood and community building and preservation. And when we were talking about the different tracks that there should be for these people to come from different parts of the country and so on, they came up with, food and food security and neighborhood organizing and caring communities and homelessness and so on. And when they were all done, they ran it past those of us on the committee and said, well, we think we've covered everything. And I looked it all through and I said, you've left out one thing that's kind of essential to communities and neighborhoods, and it's public safety. There wasn't not a word about it. So there is now a public safety track in that conference, and I hope that as the conference comes together more, it's going to be in mid-May, that there might be commissioners who would be interested in volunteering at the conference to help just meet other people working in the same issues that we are from other parts of the country. or take some of the workshops, be involved in one fashion or another. It's a great networking opportunity. People come from every state. They even come from other countries to see what we're doing here. I'll keep the commission apprised as this moves forward. Over at the Human Rights Commission, we're ramping up for Martin Luther King Day events, for International Human Rights Day stuff. They're still kicking around what to do about a homeless Bill of Rights. That's about all that I can report on about that right now, unless people have questions.
If there were 6 of us that attended out of this commission, that attended the bias-based policing training. I know it was a long time ago. It was, since we missed our, Bill was there, I know James was there, I think Joe was there, and Jesse was, no, Tamara was there, and Bob was there, and I was there. So we had half of us were there, which was a pretty good turnout. I thought it was very, very informative. I definitely enjoyed learning how that they do recognize that everybody does have biases, and that the idea is to try to get everybody to understand that they do, so they can recognize them and hopefully overcome them, or at least know when they're starting to crop up, and be able to say, hey, wait, I'm not doing this right. And the differences between recognizing the real reason for a police stop rather than maybe what the surface reason was, like maybe it was a broken taillight, but that may not have been the reason that you actually started to follow them in the first place. So I thought it was, and talking about the 4th and 14th Amendments, I mean, all of that going into it, in the very brief time we had, as compared to what the officers go through, I thought it was very, very informative and very well put on by Captain Kamkar. He was captain now, right? Yes. That was his recent promotion. Also, it was very good to hear from Lily, although I'm actually pretty disappointed that she came in and gave us all the information and then left. It would have been nice to have her stay as we discuss basically what she came in to talk about. So I'm kind of disappointed there. Carol Majeska, great comments, as always. And I'm glad that you recognize Carter's skills, because I think we don't recognize them enough. And don't blush over there. But
She's blushing.
But you don't know the half of it.
But I know she does a great job for us. So thank you, Carter. And I'm glad that other people than just us recognize that too. Thank you.
Commissioners, I haven't seen you since last year. Happy New Year, and hope you enjoy your families or whatever you do around the holiday season. The comments from my colleague, I did not think I will get to hear them here, and I'm pleased to hear them, especially because of the intent, if I understand it correctly, of that specific training is such that people will understand where all that is coming from. Keep in mind that those type of training is actually very, very compounded, and it is supposed to be for officers several days, if not weeks, and try to cram all that in 8 hours or so. It's actually very difficult, but I think it started the conversation, so I'm pleased to hear that. I have 3 points that I would like to talk quickly. One is recognizing people that consistently come to give us their perspective and keeping us connected with the community, such as Carol and Majeska. And it occurs to me that specifically Carol has been going to the municipal court to really see what the police commission recommendations and policies, ultimately EP these policies, how they affect people in some ways negatively, in some ways not. But at the same time, to really identify what kind of resources and support we might be able to provide to the officers as well. That includes training. The second thing is we saw Ms. Lily Parker that came in and presented quite a bit of information. I hope you take not only the time to read her comments and suggestions of that very committee, but we have 2 other members remaining here of the Anti-Racial Profiling Committee for LULAC, and Ms. Sarah World and Patricia Toledo over there, that obviously are here to be a resource for this commission. So hopefully we will be able to at least consider the comments and the recommendations specifically to each section. They've taken quite a bit of time to develop that. We have taken decades and decades and waiting for this type of policy we're going to be looking at today. I ask not to rush in terms of getting it through too quickly. I will be making specific recommendations out of today, but I know that there's been several attempts of not only the police department, but also the city of Eugene in building and rebuilding relationships with the community, specifically people of color. And I ask that you, in fact, consider going to this type of trainings, but also hear what the community is coming to see you. I see that as pearls of wisdom, but I know not everyone is actually willing to or able to listen to those. And hopefully we can get through this together. I'm here as a resource. I have promised myself that I want to spend 80% of my time working with those that actually want to collaborate, and 50% of my time speaking up. The main fact may not make some people happy, but that's just the nature. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Tim?
Oh, thanks. I was also able to attend the training on November 20th, which was a long time ago, and I found it very informative. It was Captain Camcar did a very good job starting the conversation, and I'm sad that everybody couldn't be there. It was a really good preface to what we're going to be looking at and working on. Thanks.
Okay, I just have a couple things. One, of course, is Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, we will be at City Council, and we will be making the presentation from the Police Commission. They had already slated this to be on the consent agenda, but they wanted an opportunity to at least have us address them with our work plan. Tamara and I will both be there. I think you're still, yeah. So problem for her is just take off, and me not so much. But anyway, we recognize that it's the middle of the day for those of you who work, and so if you can be there, that would be great. If you can't, that's okay too.
That is in the our county building?
Right.
Okay,
right.
I didn't see.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, what's the name of the hall?
Harris Hall.
Harris Hall.
Harris, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's where we'll be. So we have an item on the, that might come up on the agenda. We don't know, but it would take precedence over ours if it does. And so we may get knocked back a little bit on the agenda, but right now we're slated to be done pretty quickly. Carter will send out something, I believe, on Tuesday.
Tuesday, I get confirmation.
If it does change, but we should be set to go. The other thing is now I have gotten a couple of requests from commissioners to add items to our agenda. So I'm going to try to explain what my philosophy is on that now so that it will be clear and put it on the record. I believe what we should be working on is our work plan. That's what our charter says we should do. That's what we should be concentrating on. So what I'm trying to do is trying to forward the agenda, the work plan throughout the year and continue to stick to items that we, as a commission, decided and voted on to keep on our work plan. So keeping that in mind, I don't want to seem like I'm brushing anybody off when they ask to add things to the agenda. The proper route for that would be to appeal to the full board and ask for something to be placed on the agenda, and we can certainly, do that. You have the right as a commission to whatever you want on the agenda. So if it's related to something that you feel is important and you want to add it on there, by all means, when it's your turn to present comments or at a relevant time, go ahead and please do suggest adding an item if we need to. But as of right now, that's my plan. That's what I hope to stick to. And I hope we can get everything done on the work plan by the time the end of the year is up. So, I would like to continue to thank the people who came and spoke today. I don't know what Ms. Parker had. Maybe she had another engagement. I can give the benefit of the doubt, but yes, it's important that the community be aware. Later on, we will be discussing how we're going to address these issues, in what format, and how we're going to go about it. But I'd like to echo what Juan Carlos said. We need to take our time. We need to go through this and make sure we've hashed out details, things that are thorns in the side of people who have been bothered by these things for many, many years, need to be addressed, like anything else. So we're going to try to do that, and we'll do it with all due diligence. Lastly, I think I want to thank everybody for their patience from last month. Turns out we probably didn't need to cancel a meeting, but I made that decision based on what the weather reports were saying, and they were saying it was going to be nasty and icy and slippery, and I said, "Phil, it's worth it." So I know we need to do it's important work, but I'm kind of glad we canceled the meeting. So thank you for your indulgence on that. Okay, we can move into the next item, which is the videotaping events, and I'll ask Matt, it's on, there you are.
Yeah, sure.
You want to go ahead and present that, it's part of your packet today?
Yeah, well, I won't bore you by reading it verbatim. I'll just make a note of some substantive changes that we made and are presented to you. You know, you can tell by the effective date when there was no iPhones when this was written, or digital media. So we switched all the videotaping references, which I think were confusing in their own right, because nowadays when we talk about videotapes, that's one specific type of media. But we've changed it to recordings. The 30 days under the handling of videotapes, which I just caught one there, should be video recordings, should be the movement from the council was to change that to 6 months, so we can kind of an appropriate holding period for in the event that there's some internal affairs complaint that needs to be investigated. We can have that available to us. It's not already destroyed. Changed persons to employees, because that was confusing to the reader, the sergeant, and the commission. So we made that, and we've done a couple other housekeeping things. We no longer call it the property control unit, now it's the evidence control unit. So those changes are updated as well. Those underlying section on the very last page, those are according to Oregon administrative rules. Those time schedules for whether an investigation is a personnel investigation, if there's a videotape or recording associated to it. There are some Oregon administrative rules that govern those. Those aren't arbitrary dates thrown out by us as a department.
Okay, we have questions. I think Jim, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, it's not so much questions, it's just a couple grammatical things.
Yes, sir.
On page 2,
Yes, sir.
it's B31,
Yes, sir.
about the middle there, right after it says include, under the underlined include, then you have including right after it. You probably want to get rid of one of those two. You have included
Yeah,
and
that's correct. I see
including
that.
and
I see what
including.
you mean there. Yes, sir. I'm making that change right now.
And then on page 3,
Yes, sir.
number 5, you still have PCU there.
Thank you kindly.
Other than that, I thought it read pretty well. I know we've gone through this a couple times, I think, so. And thank you for the changes on the 6 months. I know we talked about that last time. That was,
Yes, sir.
I think, pretty important to us, too.
Okay, I have Juan Carlos and then Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate seeing quite a bit of the feedback we gave you to this policy. I think this is the way it's supposed to work in trying to capture what sentiment and feedback and values and all that, and try to bring it back in terms of the way that makes sense for the department. So I really appreciate that you've taken the time. I really hope that the chief considers these to be consistent. I know we've gone through 3 or 4 people now since the last person retired, and hopefully we'll keep somebody for longer so that we won't be consistent. I have a couple of questions regarding different sections. On part one, responsibilities and procedures, number 3, I know specifically talks about the ORS, and it's saying when we were requiring an officer to actually report to the person that he or she is being recorded. And that makes sense to me. I actually went and read that section, and it makes sense. It actually was very well written. It occurs to me that that section is specifically from the officer's perspective, but not necessarily from the person being recorded. And I need some help in identifying whether or not the officer is the one saying to Joe, "Hey Joe, you're being recorded," whenever possible, not immediately. There's no directive saying as soon as practicable. But my question is, if the officers, on the other hand, is being recorded, do we expect from the suspect or the civilian to tell the officer back, and if that's even in this policy or that is something? So that's question number one, if you want to take a note. And on section B of the same section.
Didn't we cover that last? One of the talked about covered that.
Yeah, briefly. I mean, no policy we have governs anybody outside of the police department. So-
Mr. Chairman, I believe I have the floor.
I know, I'm going to ask everybody to please remember to get in the queue here so we can keep an order
Sorry.
fashion. If you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If you would let Matt answer each question you might
Can I go
have
back?
first. and then-
Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be easier, Mr.
Yeah.
Juan Carlos. That way I can answer your questions best I know how. Like I was saying, our policies would never govern anybody outside of the police department, so we wouldn't have obviously a policy for somebody else. The law is written so that it's the affirmative requirement of the person recording or capturing the conversation to make that declaration. But there's a couple of exceptions and things like that. But the department here, we are trained, and the understand if you pulled an officer off the street and asked them, we don't develop probable cause for people for this crime if they record us while we're in the scope of our duties. And I, without getting too far ahead of myself or in the answer, that there are some court rulings that preclude us from doing that. So hopefully that answers your question. That we are not going to require people to necessarily notify us, especially when it's obvious that they're recording us. However, there could be a distance issue or something. I mean, recording a conversation where you're too close to an officer while they're dealing with somebody else, having their attention divided, that's not necessarily something we want to see happen. So they may ask somebody to step across the street to record it, or down the street a ways, and they're free to do that. And that happens that's quite commonplace.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answers your
Yes.
first question.
And the other question, the last question, is on section B of the same, on page 2 of our packet.
Yes, sir.
Under B3.2,
Yes, sir.
it says, it starts at the end of this time and goes on. It says, shall be destroyed or erased unless there are reasonable grounds to believe that blah, 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 blah. Who makes the reasonable grounds to believe that it should be blah, 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 blah? Is it the supervisor, or is it, I'm not clear on the reasonable
Well,
grounds.
I suppose it would be, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you if that was.
That's fine, go ahead.
As I read it, I suppose it'd be the investigating person, whoever, in a law enforcement capacity, has a reasonable belief or reasonable grounds to believe that there's evidence of a violation or crime that is contained in it. Although it's not really clearly delineated there, it is kind of confusing. That's how I interpret it.
The reason I'm asking is because it seems to me that in most departments, there's a clear chain of command and clear understanding about who gets to make the calls, and I think that might make it easier for officers to kind of know that. So this for your notes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the liberty.
Thank you. I have Edward and then Joe.
Thank you. It's page 3, item 6. It talks about names of individuals should not be listed in reports. And I'm just wondering how far back in this I should read to find out what reports that's talking about. You jump from policy about
Yeah.
videotape to policy about reports. I'm not sure what reports are.
If I can, I think a lot of this, this is not entirely speculative, but what we wanted to keep was people who were not, there's no criminal nexus. We're not going to start identifying or naming people when there's no real criminal nexus. So I think this was kind of added as a protection to prevent people who don't have a criminal
May I suggest?
Yes, sir.
Suggest a correction is that you add a phrase, something to the order of names of individuals appearing in police videos should not be listed in reports, da-da-da-da-da-da. Because as this reads, it just says individuals should not be listed in reports. That could come back and bite you, I think.
Sure.
But if you're talking about the individuals who appear in the videos, that would be more specific. other than that, it looks very complete. Thank you.
Okay, Joe?
Yeah, in your earlier comments, just a few minutes ago, the issue of asking somebody to move back during a situation was raised, and I was curious, is that covered under some other policy? Because there's nothing in here about that. And an expectation of how far, what would be a reasonable distance under certain circumstances, and what would be, in other words, I guess one of the things that sort of brought it up was some issues around, or at least for me, recently, were some issues around some of the response of police officers who were being videotaped essentially by the Occupy group and some of the homeless advocates that had followed later on, and there were some serious conflicts about that specifically. Is there a policy somewhere that would cover that kind of thing, or should something be included in here to look at what is sort of an appropriate set of guidelines for that?
In short, there's no policy governing how close a person is or should be to divide the attention of an officer, because I think it's situationally dependent.
I would agree.
So I would submit or suggest that there's probably no real appropriate place in a policy for it, although there is probably we start getting outside of policy and going towards training, where we instruct officers and train officers about what's safe and what isn't, and when attention is divided and when it isn't. And I think it's a situational call. Offline, I could talk to you more about what maybe might raise the awareness or concern about an officer of people being too close or flanking that officer. If you're interested in that, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. But I don't know that there's any policy there's plenty of training out there, and I don't want to get into that with the group unless everybody wanted to hear it, and I doubt that. But
Okay, because it would seem to me that since that's been raised, it might be appropriate to consider some language related to that, and maybe that's worth thinking it through. But thank you for your comments, and I just wanted to raise that.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, we're getting ready to go around a second time, and is there anyone that hasn't spoken the first round that wants to go other than Tamara here? Okay, in that case, I have Tamara and then Jim.
Thanks for making the changes to this policy that we
Welcome, ma'am.
discussed in our previous sessions. Your comments, Joe, are thought-provoking about, parameters around safety of officers and safety of suspects when there's police contact. But I don't believe that it belongs in a videotaping policy, because it's much larger than that. It's talking about that as a subject matter. It's not about videotaping, it's about the contact itself and the officer safety and suspect safety. So I don't think it belongs in here, but it's a good question. Thanks.
Jim?
Again, this is in response to the same issue. I know going through the Citizens Police Academy training, you saw we were, and not real life scenarios, but in the scenarios that we were put through also, how quick something can happen. And one of the scenarios we were put into was on one end of a hall, somebody had a knife to their own throat, and you come in. If that person is within 21 feet of you, if you don't have your gun already drawn, if they come at you with a knife, it's too late. So there's a minimum distance of at least 21 feet there if you want to go down that road. But I think I was also in a ride-along where somebody got right in the officer's face and they didn't have a weapon or anything, but they were continually warned to get away. There is a real fear factor out there for the officers that they don't know what's going to happen with that person, how they're going to react, and that person ended up getting in a fight and arrested. Things can happen pretty quickly, and I think for safety, and I think it's a judgment call. Like so much of what the police do, there's a lot of judgment involved there, and if they can support the decision that they made, I don't think we can actually put a number on how far to remove somebody. It does clearly depend on the situation. There could be no situation where they could be within 2 or 3 feet of them and there wouldn't be any problems, but depending on another situation, they might want them to be clear down the block in a way. I would hate to put any kind of numerical restriction. I don't think you could have enough paper to put all the different variables that could go into something like that into a policy, but I think relying on their judgment, which is what so much of the training goes into, I think that's what we should rely on for that. But that's my opinion.
Okay. James, and then Edward.
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I just, that it's an interesting discussion about distance in relations to contact and stuff. I draw on my former experience as a police officer, and I know from my personal experience as a police officer is that I'm concerned about my safety first. You never know. They already know what you have. You never know what they have. And that is a frightening situation to find yourself in. So, we had to be mindful that everyone is not all that innocent. If you are exposed and people know exactly what your limitations are, but you have no idea what theirs are, how would you feel going into a situation like that? So it's something that you can't say, you can't put inches and feet in front of that. It's going to rely upon officers and the way that they feel. I think it's a judgment call, and it's one of those things that they're going to make. And remember, we already lost one officer, and that was up pretty close.
Okay, Edward, and then Juan Carlos.
Some of the same experiences working as a bouncer or managing security at street fairs is if someone's close enough to you to touch you, you're a little nervous about what's going to come out of their pocket. Joe, I hear you in your concern. I don't think that this policy is where that matter should rest. But I tell you that the thing that would concern me is not so much, I don't want you near me videotaping me, or I don't want you near me. Those are officer safety issues, I think. Those are interfering with an officer charges if people aren't careful, and there's tons of case law that helps define all that here and in other places. It's the, I don't want you videotaping me, get gone, is the thing that I think we wouldn't want to see. I don't want you watching me do this arrest or this interrogation, get out of here. And I've been in cities where that was the standard, leave or you're going to jail too. I've not heard of that in Eugene, but it doesn't mean that's never ever happened or never will happen. And that's the sort of thing I would want to look for, but not in this policy. And again, as everyone else has said, I wouldn't want to set it down to the officers having to guess, is that 21 feet that I've told this person to get away? So we'd never want that. I guess that's all I have to say on that, I guess.
Thank you. Juan Carlos?
Some of the comments that were going to be about the same. From day one that I wanted to be a part of this police commission and to hopefully bridge the much needed gap between the police department and communities. I thought to myself that it was very, very important that the commission doesn't put out any policies that is going to put it in danger any officer. I want every officer to be able to go home. I have a family. I want to be able to go home too. Having said that, I will encourage this commission to think about that Juan Carlos was appointed to this commission because he has a community perspective. I am not an officer, and obviously I don't have that perspective. If there's a policy that is going to put an officer in danger, I will probably be against it. But don't be afraid of bringing that community perspective and community value. Let's not be afraid of using that voice.
Thank you, sir. Joe? Go ahead.
Yeah, just to sort of close this out, I think Edward phrased my concern very well, which is the issue of we don't want you taping us, be gone. And so that's where the concern is. I mean, I agree with the safety issues. I think, all of that kind of stuff is very important. But, we have this balancing act about, and I wonder if some language could be found saying, to the effect that it is acceptable for citizens to videotape the police. If there's, and that just becomes an acceptable practice, and, you can say go over there, or whatever, but still we don't get this get gone problem.
I mean, I hear your point. I completely understand. I think more of it comes from we won't write a policy making affirmative statements for the public. They may or may not want to do that. But I can assure you, from a training perspective, not necessarily a policy perspective, but from a training perspective, the department understands. And I think if you, like I said earlier, if you pulled an officer off and explained to them, hey, this guy's going to videotape you making this arrest. Okay, not okay. I think the answer generally is going to be something to the effect of, it's fine that person's videotapes me. What I can't have is my attention divided, so you're more than welcome to stay there and record this or view this. I just can't have my attention divided. Right. It kind of goes from there. So. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Has everybody had a pretty good shot at this now, or are we ready to take some action? Oh, one correction here from Tim.
Just a very minor thing on page 1 at the very bottom, item 3.
Yes, ma'am.
Instead of it reading officers are required to make a notice, I think it would more smoothly read are required to give notice. Minor point.
Understood.
Thank you.
With that correction, do I have a motion to,
Make a motion to approve these video recording changes.
have a second?
Second.
By 2 people.
Give it a jump.
So I have, see Edwards on first. George and Edwards, we have a motion and a second, and we have discussion on the motion. Any discussion? On Carlos.
I want to commend the department by, with sending us and bringing the state policies, and I know in some policies that we see, it's obviously very impossible to put all the ORS, because if you would come up with hundreds and hundreds of pages, but in this case, it was very nice whoever put the packet together to bring this up, because it really added clarity in my mind. And this is not something for you, but just it came to me that in some of these things that were presented to, although very useful, it doesn't have a date when it was established, nor when it was reviewed. And so I want to observe as much as I can out of this, but I don't know whether it's 20 years old or 15, so something to think about. So, well done. Thanks again.
Any other discussion on the motion? All right, take the vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Next item is professional police contacts. Discussion on that policy. Matt, you're still on board here, so yeah, let you bring that up for our consideration.
Okay. So this looks slightly different than the one you all were first introduced to. I regret I don't have a copy of the original. It was pretty skeletal though, and I think I took most or all of the comments and suggestions and incorporated them as best I could. I also looked at a few more policies throughout the nation and melded it to what makes sense for the department and the community and what I heard from the commission. So what's most substantially different, there's a couple of things. We added a definition here that it wasn't in the original, if I remember, but the Eugene Code defines protected class. It's certainly broader than what the federal definition of a protected class is, so we've included that because of, well, one, it's Eugene's version, and we're the municipality of Eugene, and two, it's broader than the federal definition, so we included that. I don't recall if we had delineated between racial and bias-based, but because we've got this broader definition, we wanted to include a profiling practice that may not necessarily just include race, and so it's defined and we can prohibit it. This policy section 402.2 was kind of an effort to, as clearly as we can, delineate to the reader, the public, the department members that the only way we'll really stamp out crime in Eugene is to actively pursue it. And we do that a lot of times by contacting people, by going to high crime areas, contacting people, being present, and that involves police contact. So we wanted to kind of put that preamble in there, that we're going to still aggressively pursue crime and criminals, but we're also going to, as steadfastly as we can, guard the constitutional rights of anybody we do contact. That, ferreting out crime doesn't come at the expense of your constitutional rights just so we can say we're stamping out crime. Is what I tried to word here as best I could. Hopefully that's what comes out to people when they read it, but I'm open to the suggestions. The department's open to suggestions, not me. I added in the stop section here, or use of a protected class in sub 3. Basically, we would never authorize an officer, whether it was for race or otherwise, to stop anyone unless they had reasonable suspicion or probable cause to investigate that person. So, and stops are defined, so I threw in the ORS, so there's another reference to an ORS inside of the policy, so that's there. I don't think there's any substantive changes to the department responsibilities or the information on what and when we'll start recording gender, race information through the IBERS, so that's still that's why it's in there in all caps, kind of waiting for an answer. Yeah, a placeholder so much. And I don't recall there are any substantive changes to the supervisory responsibility, the administration or training sections. If you catch one, that must just be an oversight based on my lack of memory, but that's it in a nutshell. I hope I didn't go over your discussion.
We have questions, first of all. Edward.
402.5. Maybe this is something every other commissioner knows about, but what is a blue team entry?
Oh, sure. Well, this would only make sense to a police department reader, but Blue Team is a software program we use to capture our internal affairs investigation, service complaints, policy investigations, and it's a tracking system. I'm not a subject matter expert in the IA field, but actually Captain Durr is more of an expert in this.
It's IA software, basically.
Yeah, what it does is it tracks pursuits, use of force, other things, and it allows the supervisors to, now have the supervisors go in there and
look at trends.
Things. And this way we have a supervisor's view on every incident. So.
Thank you.
Were you finished?
That was my question.
Okay, Carlos?
Already, huh? So you, just to clarify, you just want us to ask questions, but not necessarily to make...
questions about the policy. We're not
Okay.
making any official motion. This is the first reading since it's been revised, so I would think we want to take this and make suggestions to change whatever you need changed, and then bring it back to us at the next meeting.
In that regard, I think just based on the questions, I think you probably here maybe consider some changes. After all, this is the Eugene Police Department policy, and we're trying to make the best recommendation. I see that in 4021, the purpose and scope really sets the tone very, very well. And I actually, it's one of the strongest I've seen on the ones that I was able to research. A couple of questions here. On the 402.2 policy, where you're saying the department will only accomplish this by proactively deploying officers to areas of high crime, by contacting and investigating suspicious persons and circumstances. And I will add, and by uniformly and consistently and actively enforcing motor vehicles laws. That's important because what we get in out here is the perception, and in some cases believe that there is specific bias and some officers not understanding that laws as they're applying them, they're not, obviously they don't create the policies, they're applying and implementing them, has to be consistent and uniformly across the board. That's something to do. My question is in the next paragraph, where it starts with, well, the Eugene Police Department expects its officers, blah, 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 contacts through observation. So it also goes on to services to the community. It says, to providing equitable law enforcement services to the community. And that's very well stated. However, I don't know whether or not where the bulk of the work the police department still needs to do. I wish the chief was here, because I would want to ask him, how do you accomplish this specific area when there is a lack of trust in some communities? And as I've seen, look around community, we're not just talking about racial minorities and ethnic minorities, we're talking about also people of different socioeconomic status. So yes, I see and I read the policy clearly that the idea is to provide services across the board, law enforcement, but that also implies that there is already trust there. So if not in this policy, of course you can't put in policy, that is how you're gonna create the trust, but it has to be noted in terms of the final recommendations to the chief. I'll wait until the second round, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. When we actually make some changes, something I've been remiss about is, Matt, I think, is just hearing what we're saying unfiltered and just, wanting to put it in the policy because what we're saying, he assumes, is what we want. But that's not always the case. Sometimes, a lot of times, we are only maybe one person would like that. The rest of us don't really think we like that. So what we should probably do if we're going to do this right is to, move any changes to the policy and let that be approved by the commission, and then Matt can make the changes, okay? So keeping that in mind, has anybody got any suggestions for the policy for changes? Juan Carlos, you want to make a motion?
I do, Mr. Chairman, under 402.41, detentions. So most of that section is very well written, and I can see the intent. And the biggest hole, which is in some, if you look at it from my perspective, and that of others perhaps, you'll see a big hole. It says nothing in this policy, under the third paragraph, says that nothing in this policy requires an officer to document a contact that would otherwise not require reporting. I move to ask that all contacts be reported. This is not a reflection of community values. If an officer made a contact with anyone, there's got to be a reason. And that in itself is something that...
I'll let you speak to the motion in a moment, Juan Carlos, but we need a second before we can get into the discussion on it. So you're the maker. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Tamara and Juan Carlos and...
No, I just want to comment on it.
Okay, and I'll get you in the queue. But Juan Carlos, finished responding to your request for this motion, please.
Thank you. So there is a reason why a police officer contacts a person. And obviously it's defined to how the police officer says, I'm contacting somebody. But I'm afraid those contacts are not recorded. And if we're talking about racial profiling or the perception, that is where, in fact, some of that stems. If the police officer has the right and has already can justify that contact, I don't see why any officer will be afraid of contacting. Now, my responsibility is not to tell, well, if you have to spend 5 more minutes, it's going to cost the department another $2. There really isn't sufficient in justification for this not to go on. I do not want to see any more those pocket little notebooks in which contacts are made but never recorded, and the famous field cards. I mean, in fact, they're talking about having a software to record all those stops. So I don't see why all those contacts should not be recorded.
Okay. I have next in the queue is Claire, and then Tamara and George.
And Ed has his.
And Edward, you'll be at the end there.
So I understand Juan Carlos's impetus for putting forward the motion, but I think when we hear from staff about what is a contact and what's required to be reported, will find that a contact, in my understanding, when you're a sworn officer on duty and you stop to ask someone if they need help pumping their bicycle tire, that's a contact. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a stop, but any interaction with a resident would qualify under my understanding of policy as a contact. So it could be, saying hello in line at Full City Coffee. So I know that's not the intent, as you said. So I think it might be too broad to take that out. And there might be another way to get at what Juan Carlos is trying to do. So I'd like to hear from staff kind of what's the definition of a contact and what are some examples of some contacts that are not required to be reported under current policy.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. Without going into too much detail, there are a lot of contacts that have no criminal nexus. And there are contacts that start with a possibility of a criminal nexus that, as soon as you start talking to somebody, that all of a sudden deteriorates, and now we're just having a conversation. And there can be conversations that start with that kind of casual, oh, hey, hi, how you doing, that turn into a actual criminal contact or even a stop. The intent here was not to maybe provide a loophole for officers not to record so much as it was to prevent officers from, one, feeling obligated that now they stopped, so-and-so out on the street, now I have to record it. Because I can foresee, this is speculative purely, but if I start having to record information, that means I'm going to need your name, sir, and I'm also going to need your date of birth and your social security number, if you'll provide it to me, please, your home address, phone number, first grade teacher. So there's a lot of, in order to accurately report, we have to solicit some information that, just by virtue of the contact, that person doesn't have the responsibility, or I don't have the authority to require that from them. So I completely understand where you're going with the vagueness of this. All of a sudden, kind of just it stands out. Like, well, why is there a possibility of something that they wouldn't have to report? So a reportable contact would be a field interview where we're investigating something suspicious, or I'm giving a warning about a violation or crime. I'm taking an incident report because your bicycle was stolen, and I don't have anybody to arrest or contact, but I'm taking your information. This person is being arrested or issued a traffic citation. Those are reportable incidents, and I think intuitively officers would understand what a reportable incident is just by our business culture, but we could certainly tease out, we could probably delineate exactly what is and isn't required, although I think for the most part this satisfies it. But I get it. It kind of stands out. It's kind of like, whoa, why are we giving them a reason not to report something?
Yeah, so would a contact that involved a search require to be reported?
Yeah, there are a lot of other, and I don't have it in front of me, and I've worked on it, and we will have a policy on search and seizure, and there are, and I don't have the language in front of me, so don't quote me too much, but yeah, there are things where if I stop and contact somebody and I ask for search, I conduct a search, and hey, there's nothing, thanks for your cooperation, have a nice day. That's going to be a reportable contact because we through consent, circumvented the warrant process. So we infringed upon their liberties for a few minutes. Debate how invasive it was depending on the circumstance, but we through consent got that. Yeah, that's going to be reportable. That's not just something we'll just kind of walk away from.
Because I would say historically, from my position in the community, that has been a concern of the casual, can I look in your backpack?
Right.
And the person says, well, okay, sure, officer. And then nothing comes of it, but this person has been contacted. And so personally, I would like to see all of those recorded. So that's a way to make sure we're getting the information. And it's also a way to ensure that officers aren't using that authority in a capricious manner, because they're going to have to report on it.
Are you talking about searches?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, I have Tamara, George, James, Edward, Jesse, and Joe.
I was interested to hear what, if Captain Durr had anything to add, but then I also have some.
Yeah, if you read the detention, this is in regards to detention, so a contact under detention, is saying that it would.
Sorry, I can't quite hear you, Dan.
I'm sorry, so that, this is talking about detention, and the software program that we're going to deploy initially, it's in regards to traffic stops. There is looking beyond that, that the software system can go further into the casual contact on the side of the road, or something that where it could evolve into a search and seizure type incident. But right now, it's at the traffic citations. So I just want to keep that in the scope of what it is. But I also agree that there's a lot of contacts out there. It could be a casual contact. When I go walking down Broadway and I talk to a business owner, that technically is a contact, and it's consensual, it's a discussion, but it doesn't mean that it's any type of seizure or anything that we would document. If we had to document every contact we have, we'd never be able to do police work. So that's just expounding upon what you said, and also just to bring that back into focus about the software's ability as we move forward with the policy development.
So I have a question then. So in what instances is a field interview card issued then? So there are certain contacts that aren't reportable and a card's not issued. What instances is the card issued?
Well, I mean, there's no hard and fast rules. I mean, field interview cards, while we'll encourage officers to record contacts, especially if they came from an investigative stop or reasonable suspicion stop, they should be recording those. But they're also used to identify people that were contacted at a scene or issued a warning. It's another way. Historically, when we had the old system, it was a way to document a warning without issuing someone a ticket. You can give them a warning, and it kind of identifies on there that they were warned about this trespassing issue or this having a defective tail light without taking enforcement action. So there's a whole host of reasons why we would use them, but certainly nothing without we won't just walk up and stop a person for absolutely no reason and take down their information. You probably knew that already, but there has to be initially some kind of criminal or reasonable suspicion, some kind of investigative purpose for it, and it's just a documentation tool that it's at the disposal of the officer.
So I'm just trying to understand the contacts versus the reportable nature of some of them. So 2 examples. If say a store owner calls and says, I've had a suspicious person sort of loitering around outside my business, can you come, can you come over to the store and talk to the person? The officer gets there, the person's not around, they go in, they talk to the shop owner for a minute. I'm assuming that's a contact, but not a reportable contact. If there's nothing found, the person's gone.
Yeah.
They may not make a report about that or.
That would be an example, yeah.
What about an example of a traffic stop where the driver's asked to get out of the car, the officer talks to them outside of the car, but doesn't issue them any kind of a warning or a citation, just lets them go, but they were speeding?
I would say that's at well, that's a stop. I mean, we
so that would be reportable.
Well, it's reportable in that it's recorded in the CAD system. We've announced a traffic stop, so it's been captured by our computer system. Everything we do.
So that is a report in a sense.
Well, it is a report in a sense, but it's not a report where we would say, officer, you have to document this somehow through. That circumstance you throw at me is unique because I have a stop. I can contact you and say you need to give me your information because I've stopped you for a violation. And if you don't, it's a crime.
Right.
But
that information's recorded automatically in the system as
not necessarily that I'm. Yeah, it's a traffic stop.
Your driver's license, it's in the system. It's being reported as a.
Yeah, it's captured electronically.
So it's not separately reported. Okay,
what we're getting away. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
I'm done.
Okay. It's kind of like a work product above and beyond what maybe a stop or a contact is already generated. We don't want officers going to feeling like they have to, like, for instance, if I stopped an African-American male and we stop, talk, interaction's done, and we leave, we wouldn't want the officers to necessarily feel like that, because I've stopped somebody from a protected class and there's no criminal nexus to it, there's no issues or searches, nothing that where that person felt like they weren't free to leave or anything like that. We would need, that you need to require, that we require you to document that just by virtue of the fact that this person is of a protected class, not just necessarily like male, but of a protected class.
Thanks for humoring my examples.
Okay.
Okay. I have made a mistake, so I'm going to have to correct the cue here. I looked at Bill, apparently, and wrote Edward down, which explains why I have Edward on the cue twice, so. Bill.
We do look a lot
I
alike.
think I said his name when you were right.
Bill looked at me like, what happened to me? Okay, so George, James, Bill, Jesse, Edward, and Joe. That's the order. And then one Carlos, okay.
I understand slightly what you say about recording all of these, though something, first of all, there's the cost factor, and that is anytime, I went with a ride-along with Officer M, and it was incredible how much time, of course it was the first day or two of the software, how much time it takes to record these, and Officer M felt a little, Officer M does not like hanging out in his car, idling or anywhere, so he likes to go to a protected place. And the logistics of doing that to record it I would say, would take something like 20 or 30% efficiency out of an officer when we're already, mind you, we're in a budget crunch, a major budget crunch. I'm sorry, I'm a businessman, I look at that. So with good intentions of doing it, and I understand the intentions, that would be very, very difficult for an officer to do. There's something else that in reading the complaints the officers had about the police commission, and part of what I read in there is whenever you start micromanaging what an officer should do or shouldn't do, and if they find it, well, in this case, possibly inefficient, that there may be some pushback against that. So I would just be concerned. I mean, intention's good, on paper it's good, in practicality it would be very, very difficult to do, particularly if a contact is, hey, how you doing? Oh, let me write that down. Just, oh, I can't talk to you. I can't even look at you because I don't want contact. It would be good idea, hard to implement. Thank you.
Thank you. James.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very, very interesting topic. You know, words are very powerful. How you translate the words into the various meanings and stuff is very relevant as well. I can see where there is a lot of room for a discussion whether you define contact, and there have been several different examples that's been given around the table and stuff. If you just contact someone and, okay, because I contacted you, then I need your information. So now we started a Big Brother network and stuff, which is going to get some pushback. So that's not the way we want to go. However, what I see is that there's an opportunity to kind of put parameters around what specifically do we mean contact. And what I see from this part here, we're talking about detentions. So if you're going to, now tell me if I'm wrong about this, because it says detentions. So if you're going to detain someone, then that would be relevant that you get the information. So perhaps this part down here where it has contact, in this particular session that we're talking about, nothing in the policy requires an officer to document contact that would otherwise not require recording. Perhaps this doesn't even belong in this section. And that would eliminate this whole thing, because if you're not going to detain the person, then why would you even mention it in this section?
Yes.
So perhaps you might just want to take that out.
Can you make a motion?
I make a motion to, well, it's a friendly motion to amend them. There wasn't a motion out there, right?
There is a motion.
So you have to amend.
Oh, that's right, I'm sorry, I'm
We're
forgetting
talking
that we
about-
have a motion on the floor.
Yeah.
No, we would, that would be a substitute motion actually, because it would change completely what was going on. Yeah, no, I would suggest we let this play out and then we can come back to that.
Okay.
If it doesn't pass, okay? So that, I don't, it's always in order, just at this particular point, I just forgot that we had a motion. Sorry. I'm getting, okay. Bill?
Well, I'm going to sort of go down the same path that James had taken, because we're talking about detentions in this section, right? Which is different than just a contact.
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay, so that's where I kind of think that either the sentence needs to be changed, and I understand what you're saying, Juan Carlos, and I appreciate that. We do want to make sure that if they are detained, that it's always recorded, and I think that's where you're trying to go. So I agree. So I don't know if that word needs to be, and obviously it's a document, a detention, something like, or did that from changing from contact, or just get rid of it. But I don't think, I don't want to make it so that every contact is done, but I do want every detention, and I think that's what we're trying to get to. So, and the other thing I'll say is that as working for a bank, we have times where we have to record information about people's race and marital status and things like that. And we're very limited on when we can and can't, and that it can't be listed on certain documents. And so that's one other thing we have to think about through this process is that, when do we want that information listed and when we don't want it listed, because it does can affect the way things are looked at and done. But so, thank you.
Okay, we have Jesse next.
All right. I'd agree that this line could be removed from this section. If it was going to be moved to another section, I think there's a lot of relevant questions about what's a contact and how to define it. And I'm not sure that it's not used in a different way than just a minimal hello conversation. It's not actually used a different way in one of the other policies. It seems like contact might have a stronger definition elsewhere, and that might be confusing. Like if this said you don't have to document every conversation that would not otherwise require reporting, it'd be a whole different field of the sentence. Contact's like a stronger thing. But to Tamara's question about someone being stopped, and you said somebody who's stopped and in their car and not given a citation wouldn't necessarily require reporting, but a consent search would. The automobile stop is arguably a bigger restraint on somebody's liberty because they're compelled to pull over, whereas a consent search is overcoming somebody's right to privacy by their own consent. It seems like anytime you stop someone in the car, that would be, because you've overcome someone's liberty, that would need to be reported.
Yeah.
Which kind of I think is going to be fleshed out as the next section down, 402.42, becomes defined. Is that not true? As this becomes further developed, then what kind of specific stops are going to require what information is going to be part of that?
That's my understanding, although I'm not privy to any of the plans on what they're going to make the parameters, like what stops they're going to keep track of and what information they're going to keep track of in the computer database. I'm not, but that's my understanding of the intent.
Okay. So I'd say that this line, it's premature to decide what this line should say until the rest of the policy comes together.
Thank you, Jesse. And then we have Edward, Joe, Jim, Juan Carlos, and Clay.
I'll try to be brief. Juan Carlos, I understand, I think, what you're trying to do here. I think it's correct that there shouldn't be a time that say any one of us. I got an email last week from someone saying, I have somebody who has a problem about the way he was stopped by the police. The police say they didn't stop it. It would be lovely if we didn't have that he said come up, but not at the expense of having every single contact recorded, because that really easily leads us to a 5-minute conversation that takes 10 minutes to get into the computer. Or even it takes 5 minutes to get into the computer. So if everything has to be recorded, that cuts the actual crime stopping time considerably. There has to be a balance of those. And the other thing I know just about human nature is the more paperwork, the less likely people want to do the thing. So if they know, looking at somebody walking down the street, that they're going to have to fill out a report if they go and talk to them, that's a filter on who gets talked to. On the flip side, there is information collected routinely by some people in EPD that I suspect never goes into any kind of report or documentation. Some of that has to do with officer safety. Some of that has to do with kind of a BS meter to the person you're talking to. And I cite as an example, one of my neighbors called the police a couple of months ago to complain about somebody throwing fireworks in the neighborhood. I think I mentioned this incident. The officer came out, polite, respectful, and so on. But in the course of talking to myself and the other neighbor, he asked us each for our dates of birth. Now, the neighbor didn't take that very kindly at all. I've been around enough cops that I didn't skip a beat. Of course I'm going to give you that. That's part of how you determine whether I'm full of it, whether I have something to hide, or whether I'm one of the good guys. Does that get recorded? Did that officer go put that in someplace? If he's smart, he ran me for wants and warrants and made sure he wasn't letting somebody slip through his fingers. I'm a witness helping the complainant. So there's information gathering that goes on. I wouldn't want to see it all documented in great detail, but I think there needs to be a lot more clarity about what gets collected when and what gets recorded when, and I'd love to not see the officer said that contact never happened. That's not a good outcome for me. It seems to me that you're right, Jesse, that this sentence kind of belongs down in the recording information on stops by police, because that's what it's about. And since that's a work in progress, I would question Juan Carlos whether the motion might not be a little premature when we haven't seen all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, and then Jim. Carlos and Claire.
I think this sentence right here and the word detention are a problem. In other words, if someone is detained for a period of time, that ought to be reported, because a detention is, it's like you're not free to go. So, in other words, if somebody's being detained, that ought to be reported, because that's considered significant enough that you are being detained. And during this, there's a couple other things. During the discussion, it sort of struck me that my perspective on this has changed because I haven't driven for 5 years. I stopped driving 5 years ago. And I think about stops right now, person to person, face to face in the street, as opposed to, somebody leaning over the side of a car. And so one of the issues for me, again, comes down to sort of looking at a lot of the stuff that happened around the homeless. And, for example, being downtown and following Allie around, who gets called, some kids are being harassed, and there's like 5 or 6 kids being detained, okay, and, grilled, and sometimes given the choice, will you consent to a search, and if you don't, I'm going to take you in anyway and search you. And so, they haven't done anything wrong. There's no obvious probable cause except for the fact that they're homeless. They are being detained. They are being searched. And did those contacts get recorded? Okay, in other words, if what's happening is we have a class of people who are homeless being searched regularly, is that, and they're not happy about that at all, and then let go, or, is there a reason to have detained and searched them to start with? So, again, if they're being detained, for longer than whatever, a short conversation, I think that should be reported.
Jim?
Well, this is rarity, but I am in agreement with Joe and Jesse on this. I had real concerns when you said that there may not be a report made by a vehicle that had been stopped. I mean, to me, that is detaining, that is stopping somebody. To me, there should be a report made for that. So that really had me concerned about the stops, and I can definitely agree taking this out of here, because this is talking about detentions. There probably shouldn't be, if somebody's being detained, there probably shouldn't be an option on whether they complete the report or not. And the further definition of what they're trying to record in the context would be in probably 4.2, right below it. But that really had me concerned about actually stopping somebody, but to me that just seems an easy way to get around harassment, stopping somebody constantly over and over and over again. I didn't give you a citation. I'm not going to fill out any kind of report, but I can see that. I can see the potential abuse for that. Also, when George was talking about inefficiencies as far as filling out the report, not everything that's inefficient is bad. Just look at our justice system. I got to say, sometimes that's pretty inefficient the way we go through over and over and over, appeal after appeal after appeal. And a lot of things the government do is pretty inefficient also, but we're kind of required to follow what they say. But so I'm not sure yes, our justice system might be inefficient, but it still seems to work out in the end in most situations. So I got to say there's something that's inefficient that I don't think we want to get rid of. That's my 2 cents.
Okay, Juan Carlos, and then Claire, and then myself.
It occurs to me that this policy really goes to the heart of the actual issue, and that is the perception of racial profiling. At the last meeting, I in fact asked, and I believe I even asked with all the respect to the chief, whether the racial profiling exists in the EPD. And he responded, well, we're going to find out through this data collection system. So I'm afraid that I hear way too many times that my Latino youth and some of my friends that happen to be African American kids, they're stopped. And in fact, they may be detained and there's nowhere to be recorded. So because this specific language is under the detention, I know more or less my rights. I think I can say, officer, am I being detained? Am I free to go? I think that's the specific key words. Am I free to go? And I think the officer will have to then respond, yes, you're free to go, and then I can go. But with certain populations, whether specifically racial or ethnic or even socioeconomic, they just do not know that exists for them. They don't know how to call it. In fact, they don't even know that they have that as a right. So I can see how some commissioners may not be willing to say all the stops need to be recorded. But again, I need to remind you, this is under detention. One of my kids is being detained, and he is walking away, going to his family and saying, I was detained for 10, 15 minutes, and nothing was recorded. And when we call to the police department, we say, my kids was detained for 10, 15 minutes. And they say, well, that didn't happen. And yet I see the story over and over and over. So that's something that you need to be thinking about. This is under detention, somebody is being detained. And yeah, of course, if the alternative is to get rid of it, and again, dump it into the section that we don't even have any control of, then that's fine. But I need you to understand the heart of this policy is to prevent racial profiling. That's what it is. It's taken decades to get to this point, and I thank the department to finally get to this point. I'm happy that we're having this conversation. But it is what it is.
Okay, we have Claire, myself, and then James, anyone else?
Thanks. I really appreciate the thoughtful comments from folks. My ears also perked up at the idea that a traffic stop could happen and there would be no data collection. If the point of the data collection is to analyze whether or not racial profiling or other kinds of unconstitutional profiling is occurring, then from my perspective, and I know we've got a committee working on the particulars of what's going to be collected, but from my perspective, the data needs to be collected and collated and analyzed. And that means for if it's only applying to traffic stops for this phase-in, than any traffic stop. And I actually have a real life example of my husband and I being pulled over because the officer thought our dog was not tethered legally in the back of the pickup truck. Turns out the dog was tethered, but he couldn't tell until he pulled us over and stopped us. So there was no citation involved, but there still was a detention. And in my mind, that's an appropriate thing to record. This is also accountability, and I don't believe it's micromanaging in terms of what our public servants are doing with their time. And so I don't necessarily want them to record the more casual contact or the conversation with a business owner, but if they're detaining someone, I do want to see some accountability for that detention. And then again, in terms of the unconstitutional profiling, you got to record the data. That's the only way. If it's not happening, then that's great, and the data will show that. And if it is happening in some quarters, then we can take action to remedy that. I don't have any particular suggestion in terms, I think Jesse's suggestion of striking this from this section made sense. But I think in terms of the overall context of what we're trying to accomplish with collecting the data, we got to collect the data, bottom line.
Thank you. Okay, myself and James, I have a question and a comment. Some departments issue warning tickets when they stop someone. Does Eugene do that? I'm not sure.
No, sir.
Okay. So here's the other question is, when a car is stopped, two things happen. They notify dispatch, and dispatch automatically runs the license to make sure the car's not stolen. So there's a CAD record of the stop, correct?
Yes, every stop, yes.
Okay, and then and also there's in-car video. Are all the cars equipped now with in-car video, or?
Yes, assuming that system's functioning properly, there's not a
Right.
maintenance issue.
Right, so there is a record of the contact that can't be denied. If somebody
Absolutely.
says they were stopped at a certain date and time, it's simple enough to check the CAD and also check in-car video, and that would
Yes.
be the record, correct? Okay.
And license and registration.
And license, registration, we have that record on there, okay. So my question, my concern is, those are my questions, thank you. My concern is, I mean, I know we need to collect data, but if you broaden the scope of collection, I mean, we have an entire country up in arms right now just on collection of metadata, which doesn't even identify you as a person. It's just bunches of numbers and algorithms that tell who's making, not who, but all these calls are being made to a particular number in Iran or something like that. That's the kind of thing people are upset about right now. They don't want the government finding out and collecting data on them, and I understand that. But we also have a need to make sure that our department's acting fairly when we stop people. So will there be a major blowback, as someone said, pushback from people saying, why are you taking my date, birth, my name, my race, my sex, and all that information? You're just talking to me. Why is that information being collected? Where is it going? Where are you going to keep it? How long are you going to keep it? Who purges it? Who's in charge of taking care of that and making sure my name doesn't stay down there? I don't want my name in your records forever, or for 90 days even maybe. Why should I have, if I'm riding my bike along and I stop at the stop sign, I try to put my foot down on the curb. If I don't one day and I get stopped and the officer just wants to give me a friendly warning, thank you very much, sir. I don't want my name recorded and put down there with, in a record somewhere that, I mean, it just seems to me to get to where we're going to get too far out of hand. Perhaps there's a compromise in between, I don't know. Maybe there's something we can do about detecting or issuing orders to only record stops that are offensive, that people take offense to, or that they raise an objection to. If they don't object, maybe then it's not important. But if they do object, and Carlos mentioned that some people don't feel like they have the voice, and that's understandable too. So I don't know, but I don't think that, in my opinion, that recording every stop is a good idea. It's just going to cause more problems. James, go ahead.
Okay, thank you for that. Just kind of coattail on what you're saying. In my position where I was a police officer and I did a car stop, the first thing I did was I contacted dispatch and I gave them the license plate number. They ran a check. So I knew exactly who was owner of that car, who that car was registered to. So whatever the violation, if there was just something that I was going to issue a warning, a verbal warning to them, There was no need for me to go ahead and jot down their personal data, their name and all this other stuff. But it was already recorded that I stopped that car at that location at that time, so it's already a record. The record is already there. My thing when I'm looking at this particular thing here, the word is detention. This sentence says down here, nothing in this policy requires an officer to document a contact that would otherwise not require reporting. It doesn't say that they are detained. I don't think that this particular sentence belongs in this area. I think that this is what's confusing everyone because we're talking contact versus detention. Detention is preventing a person from moving about, which should be recorded. It should be reported, I agree. So I think that if this is the nexus of this discussion and we wasted a lot of time talking about this, and by simply removing it for now, and perhaps it would go up under the section that's not filled right now because you're talking about recording information on stops by police, perhaps it would be more appropriate there. But I think that this is what's got us all up in arms and is drawn away from the word that's actually about it's detention, detaining. It's not casual contact.
So I just had some practical comments. George had raised the issue of officer who, wanted to make sure he was in a secure location before entering the data that he needed to. And I don't know if the officer is required right immediately after the stop to stop and do the data entry, or if it could be a circumstance where they make the notes they'll need to then enter the data in the system when they're back at a desk, so there might be a practical way to address that concern. And then the concern, about why are you collecting this, how long are you keeping it, where's my name going? If you are issued a citation, then that's, we all know your information gets written down. But in terms of the work being done for this pilot part, presumably the demographic data can be stripped away from the individual identity of the person who was stopped, so that you're not keeping a whole full database with every individual name connected to the demographic data. It can be separated out. And believe me, the NSA does know who's calling who and when they're calling, and they're keeping all that data, just as an aside. And the CAD and the in-car video is not going to record race, ethnicity, or officers' perception of those things. And that's some of the other stuff that we're trying to get at.
Okay, I think we've had enough discussion. We're ready to vote on the motion. Carlos, you want to restate your motion again, just so everybody's clear on it?
Yes, sir. Under the section detentions, I am asking the commission to record all the contact for the purpose of detention.
Okay. No, okay, is that what you have? Because I think you added something about detention.
Yeah, well, it's under the detention, that's what's bothering me.
Oh, okay, so you're, but what I
All the
wrote down
contacts
was-
with the intent of detaining somebody need to be recorded.
The original motion, as I recall, said that you wanted to record all contacts.
In this section, yes.
So are you wanting to amend your motion to state all contacts that involve detention?
It's, yeah, I would.
Okay, so then the wording will be all contacts that involve detention be reported.
Yes.
Okay. We have an amendment to it. You favor the amendment? You
Sure.
seconded the motion? Okay. The motion has been restated and amended. And again, all contacts that involve detention be reported. Everybody understand the motion?
But I have a question to clarify. So we're saying remove this line and put in,
Not yet.
but we're just adding what you're saying to this
No,
line?
I'll answer that, yeah, we're just adding
Changed
the
it.
language right now to that section. There was no motion before us to remove anything, only to add this to the section.
To change it. He
To modify
amended
that
his
sentence.
original motion.
Is it to,
So-
nothing in this policy requires an officer to document a contact resulting in a detention that would, period.
No.
Officer to document a contact that results in it. But officer is required to document all contacts that result in a
Involved in
detention.
detention, right? So this is being added to the end. The first part of it says that nothing requires a contact be documented, just a simple contact. The second part says all contacts that involve detention must be reported. So that's what you're adding onto this section.
Are you adding it or
Is that-
replacing it, Juan Carlos?
Well, I didn't talk about replacing it. I mean, eventually, hopefully, somebody would get rid of that first sentence, but adding the specific language on all contacts that requires detention need to be recorded. That's the actual motion.
Okay, I'm sensing the board feels this is a little unwieldy. Would the board feel better if Juan Carlos amended his motion again to remove that first sentence? Would you be willing
I
to
would.
do that, sir?
I move to remove that section which states nothing in this policy requires an officer to document a contact that will otherwise not require reporting, and replace it with all contacts requiring detention should be recorded.
Okay.
Reported?
Are you willing to second that?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. And so everyone understands, the section reading nothing in this policy requires an officer to document all contacts will be struck. And in its place, we will have a section that reads all contacts that involve detention must be reported. Okay? Everybody understand that motion? All right, that's less confusing.
Yes, it
I'm
is.
ready to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, will you make that change in the policy and bring that to us next week, next month rather, and we can, we still have about 5 minutes left in this segment. Do we need to talk about any other sections in here?
Just understanding, could I run a
Certainly.
scenario by
Yeah.
everybody? I'll walk across downtown twice a day, probably, and I'll see somebody walking across the street in a way that's unlawful. And I'll stop and say, hey, I'm in uniform, I'll say, hey, just so you know. What you did was illegal, you can't do that. And they'll say, well, I'm going to take off then. And I'll tell them, well, actually, you can't take off. You got to stay with me for a minute. I need to make sure you understand this. I could issue a citation. We'll finish the conversation. Have a nice day. That is a detention. So do you want those kinds of contacts would happen many, many times a day by our police officers? This is something that would generate a lot of work. It would slow down our ability to get work done, to be proactive. So I'm not saying not to do it, I'm just asking, what's the range of detentions, stops that you're really interested in? Is there a way to, more narrowly define it? Or is the contact that I just described, the stop I just described, exactly the kind of thing you'd like to see a report on?
Can I attempt to?
Well, we can go around and get about again like this, but I think the commission's already voted what to do, so let's have Matt put it in like we've amended it, and at the next meeting, we will allow time for discussion on how, maybe you want to think about that, and then we'll come back and we'll just see if that solves the problem or causes more problems in the meantime. I think we should move on to something else so we can get through this section because we're ready to start the next one.
So the chief just wants to know our intent without that.
Right, and that's why I'm asking everybody to think about that for, ensuing month, and then next month in February when we have our meeting, perhaps you'll be ready to answer that question.
Hey, Carter, can you send that question, those scenarios like that to us? That the chief was up
Unless we have a motion on the table, I'm going to move on to the next section.
Can I just a point of order on that? I mean, I just want to know, so are we looking to approve this policy next month, or is this still a work in process? Because that would change.
There is no timeline for
Okay,
any policy.
so,
As
okay.
far as we're concerned, we take the time that's needed to
Okay.
amend it to our satisfaction, and once we do, we submit it. So that's how it worked with the previous one we did tonight, so that's the way we'll do it. I think it took us several months, more than a few, to get that first policy.
Mr. Chairman, did you say we had another 5 minutes for this specific
No,
section?
we're just about 2 minutes left in this segment right now.
And am I in the
So
queue?
I can have a motion to extend time if somebody would like to do that, we
If
can-
you have 2 minutes, I think I believe us in the queue.
we need no, there was no queue
No.
because there's no motion, so I don't have
I'm sorry.
anybody in the queue.
Just for my clarification, you're saying we still have 2 minutes left in this section?
That's correct.
Okay, so
Now we have 1 minute
It says till 7:20 on the
That's
on the
right.
agenda.
I have 7:19.
That clock's off.
Clock's off,
It's
okay.
been 7:20 for a long time.
I don't believe functionally we can go on and get anything done in 1 minute. But if somebody wants to make a motion to extend time for this, I'm open to it. Anybody want to make a motion? Then we'll move on to the minutes approval. And at this point, I'd like to ask the commissioners for any corrections they might have. November minutes, I know it's been a long time since the November meeting, but Juan Carlos?
On the minutes for November the 14th, under our packet, page number 3, in my comments, I was stating that this conversation is overdue and maybe that the commission should have a discussion on human rights, and what's missing is versus civil rights. And that needs to be added on to the minutes.
Which line? Sorry. Oh, it's in the middle.
Oh. Well,
Right above where it says.
I'm on listed. So right after human rights.
Make that correction for them.
There's a huge difference between human rights and civil rights, and I wanted that to be captured specifically.
Okay. It'll be corrected. Any other corrections? Jim?
I think it's on the same, it's on page 2, toward the middle where it says, Chief Kern says, anyone can record officer, probably should be, I'm not sure what it should say. Well, probably it's a response to Juan Carlos in the prior statement, so it probably should say anyone can record an officer. And then down below under bias-based policing, toward the end of Chief Kern's statement, it says, and the based on the pilot. That probably should say, get rid of the word the, and just be and based on the pilot. Otherwise it was kind of confusing to me. Does that make?
Those 2 corrections, correct? Anyone else? I have a correction that I'd like to make on behalf of one of our speakers. Jessica C. Screen has let her know that there was an error in the last minutes now. The record shows that this was not Carter's fault because she was not here at the November meeting, so proving once again that she is indispensable. We have a request to amend the minutes, and the correct wording should be on her remarks should be Jessica C. Screen expressed concern about an incident near the home where an officer suggested to neighbors that they messed with someone illegally, is what was said. But the actual remarks and checking the tape, this is what the officer suggested they mess with the person's possessions, not with the person themselves. So she's asking for that correction. And Carter, you will take care of that, please. Have I captured it?
Well, the second sentence changed.
Put another second. I'm sorry. Oh, these 2 sentences replaced the first. I'm sorry, I missed that. Also that she said this could result in violence, and at least one altercation has already happened over the person's possessions. So if we can add that. That paragraph. Send this back to you when you go. You have it. Good. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the minutes as amended and corrected.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Jim. Motion by Carlos. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, we're moving on to break, and for 10 minutes, so let's stretch our legs and be back here.
That's a good point. That's a great point.
I almost commented on Bill, because I'm credited in your bank. Just the things that we have to go through, all the, we talk about inefficiencies. CFPB comes to mind as soon as I think about inefficiencies and what they've created.
Had a great, that's what I'm nervous of.
I agree. What he's talking about, that's
That word, I mean, yeah, well, I think any policy set, when something went wrong sometime, they want to make sure it never happens again. And therefore, you get these inefficiencies, so it's their world.
But it's interesting, his stuff, so I actually think that should be, the race part should be recorded.
That's what I'm thinking too.
Not the name, but it should say I made a contact with this person and they were, this is what.
I'm also thinking when you do a traffic stop, doesn't your ID state what your race is?
Well,
so that when you do a traffic stop and you've already got that information, can't that be, why would you even ask that? Because maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that information isn't recorded like with the state with your license. I can't.
Well, no, yeah, just your sex, but it's not your race and all that's not recorded. But, you know, I think sometimes, at least what I've seen when I'm out with them, like James' example, when you stop somebody and you're just going to go, they don't always get information on driver's license. They have the car is all they have, and so it could be something different.
Well, that's true too. You're right. Yep.
You know, where I think, you know, but I do, because like you and I know, we're only allowed to collect certain information, and only on certain loans, and then we scrub it.
And sometimes on names
to
when you
present
sound like a particular ethnicity, you're in a lot of trouble. You have to be very, very careful on and comments that you're making when you're determining a loan, the things that you can say and things you can't say. You know, we've all seen stories about, you know, the things were put in, you know, all the information that shouldn't have been there that are put in the loan that the person probably didn't think anything of it, but when you're reading it outside,
somebody who doesn't know anything.
Oh my God, how could that go in there?
Yeah, why did they talk about that? And that's where it's like sometimes this, you know, makes me a little nervous because how we really scrub that down and how we really then report it as being very generic, but to prove that we aren't discriminating, that we are, and then on the other hand, prove that we are making loans to, you know, these protected and economic, you know, and so it's really interesting because it sort of has a lot of similarities to what we want to do and what we don't want to do. And so it's like,
I encourage you to see that they spend quite a bit of time.
You don't want
And they made some
everybody's information about everything.
what it is. I like to see the format of Happy New Year to you. So like this, and then they make some specific recommendations for 5 years to consider. But I like the tone on it, which I didn't think the tone is of collaboration and being part of, even though there's obviously. I'm actually pleased. What happened was, you guys come out there.
He goes, I was like, I was done, and there's nobody else in there,
I think it would have been more private.
Especially because of hopefully you will. If you want to ask the facility.
So where is the
Poor guy.
self-report, which is known?
How do we know? There's no Captain
So you don't take your purse or anything. One day I was really low on gas, and so it's like, okay, I usually go to Costco. I didn't want to stop on the way there, so I go, well, I've got enough gas to get there, but I need to stop on there.
That's not going to be
So once I take my Costco, which is my car, right? That's all I do. And in my pocket,
I went on a hunt. I saw
And when I got there, they had the evening morning center that day, so I got there, there were some people there, back right? And so there was some that wanted to drive by. So I got out of my car and like threw a couple back to my bike. And get out of my car, and I said hi to the guys that was standing there, good morning, or whatever, and then I went in. Well,
this that thing may be an
5
opportunity.
minutes later, they was like, did you post that thing? And I'm like, so she goes,
Yeah.
jeans, I just have to shower. And I've been sitting, I've been like, down to all the things that fell out.
Relates itself to the oranges. Is a community of parents trust. Communities with high trust have less regulations. Communities with low trust have high regulations. And a high, probably high level of regulation is that you will learn for dress highly spiritual. And so the objective of those communities is and find ways to audit whether it's 100% whatever that is, but find ways to audit it, which is a lot more efficient, a lot more effective, a lot more powerful, a lot more.
I will argue with all the respect, I will want to see
Something you and I both want to, that you can get away with it, you will.
that will be in the world. Believe it or not, really impressive, really. She's saying,
I knew who the guy was, I knew his name, and I knew what he was.
Summit Bank.
One I'm not familiar with.
It's a community bank where we only have one office here in downtown Eugene.
Okay,
Local.
you get to know all your customers.
Yeah, started about 10 years ago.
Led Wells Fargo recently. Just watch you get bigger and bigger and less helpful and less helpful. Finally started costing us not a lot of money.
That's what,
Good, how are you?
So it's coffee sometime.
Yes. It's been busy.
Yeah, crazy and so on. You as well.
Okay.
I need some ECOU questions.
in person, they'll.
I feel like you can tell.
I knew you could always refer me to something about something.
You love that job, didn't you? I really do.
What do we need to
So, you know, I get fired.
Zach Warden was coming to you.
I mean, financially.
Oh, but you get all the rotten tomatoes you can eat.
What is it, $10,000 a year?
Actually, it's a little bit better than I thought.
Somebody ought to tell the citizenry that.
Planning process. Yeah.
I didn't forget you were there.
I was seeing this place. I've never heard.
Right. I don't feel like I need to talk.
That costs a little we don't call
Well, DMC, as you know, previous conversations.
That looks so we have.
So, I don't have any background.
All right, commissioners, if we get back to business, please. Everyone, hello, can we come back to the table? Yeah. Thank you.
I think this table is.
We're being called back to the table.
But also want to see more of that. Part of it. I don't see that very well. And I want to see what we do.
That's what the confederation is.
Banking? Both. But mostly grants, foundation, health focus, foundation grants. And then some local fundraising, but that's difficult.
Chief Kearns, 2 words, Soup Nation. January?
See, you
Did this month something?
Yep, sorry.
December was not so good.
You feel better.
It was a busy month, both good and bad. And you had stuff to do too.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get started with our next section is dealing with the report from the chief and everybody. We made it available in the packet here, and everybody hopefully has had a chance to look at that because Carter sent it out. And yeah, a couple times since we had no meeting. So this is the report, 2012 versus 2013. Comparisons are in here. It's a very good report. And I'd like to entertain questions for the chief. In fact, I'll turn it over to the chief to answer any questions that any of the commissioners might have.
Yes.
Edward?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's all right. I was going to let the chief pick people. It would be.
And I was going to just start yakking anyway, so.
That's fine.
Pursuant to our motion that we just voted on here, I'm looking at the number of stops and stops.
Which page are you?
For the year, or I'm on total calls for service comparison. And I'm thinking, did we just vote to have about 18,000 separate reports made over the course of the year? And the answer is, yeah, we did. So we might want to think about how that plays out when we actually come to vote in favor of this entire wording. Just a thought. That's a big number, and that's an awful lot of typing. That's the only comment I have yet.
All right, questions? Joe?
Is this actually only partial till the end of August, or is that a typo?
Sorry, I haven't looked at this for a while.
We're on the-
Year-to-date comparisons. Yeah, so it is just August.
So we're looking, these numbers should actually go up by another, at least a third, probably a little more.
Chief, did you want to highlight anything in particular, or any point you want to make on this time?
No, I mean, I can talk about some of the monthly activity if it would be helpful, but I'd hate to waste time on something I'm not interested in.
No, that's okay. James had a question, though.
Yeah, Chief, Happy New Year. I didn't get a chance to say anything. I saw you go up on stage and stuff there. I don't know if you saw yourself on television and stuff.
No, I didn't.
You were the last one walking up on stage, so they got a good shot of your backside. So.
Yeah.
Thank you, James.
That's K-Val for you. question is, there is a trend, and as I shared with my fellow commissioners and stuff about lawlessness and stuff that's occurring down in Southern Oregon, and in particular, we're talking Josephine County, where now they didn't fund law enforcement, the sheriff, and now they have a neighborhood watch group that's walking around armed, that's assuming that role and stuff. After talk with the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General and stuff, that information, they have that, they're aware of that. However, because of lack of reporting incidents that these things are going there, they can't necessarily say, okay, we're going down here to do this, although they're trying to refer state police resources to the area, which is very difficult. My question is that I noticed that some of the information is that a lot of the property, distressed property down there, farms in particular, certain supremacist groups have taken over those properties and stuff and starting to do whatever they do, which makes it very dangerous. Have we had any indication of an increase in that the groups like that here in Eugene or the surrounding areas that you're aware of?
We haven't seen a notable increase in supremacist groups. We have supremacist organizations here. They're very quiet, under the radar, and in an organized fashion don't do many actions in the Eugene-Springfield area. We haven't seen what you're describing.
Okay.
But they are here, and they're ugly.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering because that's a real concern, especially not only with people of color, but anyone that goes in those areas and stuff, and you make a wrong turn, you're not from that area, they don't care. So I was just kind of wondering, because I'm collecting some kind of data and stuff, and we're going to be working with other groups and stuff, advocacy groups, to try to work with the Attorney General to try to get some fixes, or at least get that discussion going. The legislator, we talked to a number of them, and they are aware of what's going on. But again, there's no one that's reporting. And we do have one of our commissioners that live in that area. She received a comment about there's no need to use 2 bullets when 1 will do. So certainly that has, I am concerned about that. And I think that we all, when I left the meeting, I left the Attorney General with if one of us is unsafe, then none of us are safe. And they all agreed, so.
This isn't so much a question as a comment to that, is that you may not be aware of, a lot of people don't know, Springfield does not have a Human Rights Commission. So human rights complaints and that sort of complaint about supremacist groups get routed to the Eugene HRC, even if they happen in Springfield. They don't necessarily all go to EPD, that I know of. So you might want to check in with HRC staff and see if there's anything that's come up there other than those persons who displayed a racist banner on a bridge over the freeway a few months back.
Okay. Well, here's another thing, and I don't want to take the conversation over, but I mentioned that the State Attorney General, on their website, they have a complaint for racial discrimination, racial issues on their website that people can actually go on there and fill out. So I'm not sure if people are aware of that. Their Department of Civil Rights and stuff was unmanned or unofficed for a while, and now they're hiring people in order to pick that back up. So when you speak to people and stuff, then you may want to inform them that site does exist, and they do look at it and they do examine it.
Okay, we have Claire and then Tamara.
So actually, I had a question for the chief, but before I was going to ask Edward. Sorry.
Go ahead.
In your role as Human Rights Commission, would you be willing to bring up that question to staff yourself rather than asking James to do it? About whether there's...
Well, thank you. That's an excellent
information
suggestion, Counselor. James, I will get you together with those folks.
Thank you. Or just find out what the status is. I think it would be good for us to know too,
Okay,
if those racial bias incidents get reported to EPD in any manner, or routinely.
Not from another jurisdiction.
Oh, okay. It still might be good information. I don't know where you house it. So my question isn't so much about the particular report, but maybe something just to share with us in the future if you're able. There was the story in the paper about the jail and the lower numbers of quick releases, but there was also information about reduced number of prosecutions or bringing charges against folks as being another dynamic at play. And I'm just wondering if, it may be too early at this point, but I'd be curious in the future to kind of get a sense of how officers are feeling in terms of what we were hearing in the past of I arrested that guy and, 2 hours later he was back out committing crimes. If that is still the same dynamic, if it's shifted at all, if there's just a sense that having those jail beds back has really helped mitigate some of that, or if we're still in, the same kind of crisis, but looks slightly different because it's the lack of prosecutions as opposed to early release. So
It's a slightly less severe crisis. Detectives are frustrated with the same things that they were before the jail beds were added. The jail beds haven't all been filled, those that have been authorized. They're still hiring deputies so that they can do that. And the 26% fewer prosecutions is a real frustration because we arrest people for drug dealing downtown and felony drug possession. They're not charged. They're immediately released, or they're released within a day. The DA's office doesn't file. I'll be sure to ask the detectives between now and the next meeting, give you an idea of what their sense of it is.
great, thank you.
Okay, I have Tamara, then Juan Carlos, then Jim, then Jesse.
So my question is just about corrective. So it looks like, and this slide was included, it looked like it's the cars that's have been trending down is the older model cars that are commonly stolen, leave the market. But there are two other slides in here, the 2012 versus 2013 property crime comparison slides. That looks like 2013 was higher. One of them shows automobile theft for 2012, 2013 over 2012 up 23%, if I'm reading this correctly. The other one had a little bit different statistic on it. Are they going back up?
Yeah, burglaries went up and stolen cars went up. And remember, it was July 12 that the jail beds went away. And then in 13, the district attorney's office dialed back. So that combination of factors essentially made it difficult for us to manage the offenders that are committing those crimes.
Okay, I was just curious why that looked like it was ticking up. Thank you.
Okay, Juan Carlos, Jim, and Jesse.
Chief, I didn't know if you were planning, obviously you're giving us this so we can look at it, but I didn't know if you were planning to go over this or not. But I was curious if you can share more about the committee, the Stops Data Committee. For the record, and with all the respect to the chief, I don't mean any disrespect in any way, I can see that somebody like you want to put together an advisory or a committee to help you in any work that you're trying to accomplish. But it struck me as interesting that then you're bringing that to then be inserted in a policy. Certainly when I got the call to give you names, that was not part of the deal. But my question is this, Chief, are those meetings that are being held, are those public?
I don't think they are right now. The meeting that you see on here is one that I attended in order to make an introduction. And then I also attended the training, the review of our bias-based policing training.
That troubles me that those type of meetings are not public since it's being done on behalf of a public entity. So obviously, I've seen that quite often when there is a union, police union involved. All of those meetings seems to be closed in terms of my recent memory. So is there a reason why why those meetings will not be public?
Are you trying to say something?
That committee advises the chief, it doesn't advise any public body. So it is not a public, there's nothing about public law that requires that to be a public meeting. It's an internal staff advisory committee.
And their product will come here. We will see what they produce. They make recommendations to me, and our senior staff will consider that when determining what our policy should be. So you'll see it through that, of course.
See, I just, it seemed like it's out of the ordinary to see a product being worked separately in a way from the police commission, but later the police commission will give the blessing to that group when it had nothing to do with neither the creation of the guidance of the goal of that community that was already, if I understood correctly, that was already created by you and they just come in to execute. So it just seemed to be out of the ordinary for me to insert that in later. I asked the police commission to approve it. This is why I was asking if it's public, so I perhaps understand it better. But if those are your personal or your advisors, then I guess that's how public service operates.
Okay then, Jim?
A couple of questions. I noticed on the UEV stolen and recovered, there's the normal cluster downtown, which I'm not surprised about, especially, I'm more talking about on the recovered side. But it looks like there's a pretty big cluster out there in northwest Eugene also, that's all recovered. Is there a particular group that's you think, or?
The theory is that someone lives out there who's stealing the cars from other places and ends up there.
But you don't, obviously you don't know who that person is yet?
No.
And it looked like that you completed most of you, or at least quite a big chunk of the promotions, lieutenant and sergeant fillings. So how many officers does that, it usually turns into a domino effect as people move up, that opens the positions below. How many positions are you still looking to fill?
The way we make decisions about hiring is not on how many sergeant or officer vacancies there are today, but how many sworn vacancies there are, knowing that domino effect occurs. So we're almost always at the number of authorized sworn personnel. We are short one captain right now, and sometime this year I'll go out for a recruitment for them.
Good, thank you.
Jesse?
The 20% increase in traffic and person stops, that's really high. What, is it more officers or what's behind that?
This year, we're determined to reduce traffic crashes, and that means our motorcycle officers need to spend more of their time on enforcement in the key intersections where crashes are highest. And we have 6 or 7 intersections in Eugene that they focus their time on. So they've sort of apportioned their work time, and they spend more time doing enforcement.
How about the person stops?
The person stops, that's part of a strategy to reduce crime. It's effective to contact people. Now let's use the word stop, but some of these are not, they're encounters, but that we don't have a way of, in this data to change, to determine how many encounters we have and how many stops we have. Might be something we consider for the future, given the conversation we've had tonight. But that's part of our crime reduction strategy.
Are those mostly going to be downtown then?
Many of them are downtown, but they're also in the focused area where there's a concentration of property crime.
The focus area?
Well, they'll change. The focus area changes from week to week depending on the data.
Okay.
Maybe he knows.
So in that data right now, it'd be just stopping someone to chat with them for a minute and see if there might be reasonable suspicion of criminal activity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we produce a daily watch plan that gives the officer, it's a sheet of paper that tells the officers this is where the focus should be this week or today, and this is the geographical area, and these are the offenders that are committing most of the crimes out there. If the officers are being briefed every day by their sergeants on what the modus of operandi is and what other information we have about suspects, and they should be looking for these people, and they should be looking for folks that meet the description of the unknown suspects, and then people who behave in ways that are consistent with the burglar's activities. Some burglars, for instance, will ride up and down, we know this, they ride up and down streets on their bicycle with a backpack, and they stop and knock on doors and go from door to door until nobody's home. And so we look for people that are doing that. We wait for calls like that. And so that's why some of these stops, person stops are probably encounters where we'll pull up and, you know this as well as anybody at the table. We'll have a conversation with them and see if it should become a stop. And some of them are stopped because a violation occurred.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we're encroaching a few minutes into our bias-based policing time, but I've got two people in the queue, so I'm going to cut it off after that. Tamara and James.
Mine's just brief. I was wondering, because I couldn't tell from the data here, how did the student area do in the residential burglary category during the holiday break? Do you know?
I haven't seen that yet. Now,
Okay.
one of the problems we have is that after the new records management system went live, our crime analysis unit went to work on developing the reporting systems to take the new reports and convert them into this kind of information, this kind of mapping. That hasn't been completed and won't be for a couple of months, so you're not going to see this kind of report for a while.
Okay. And I just want to say I'm very excited to be living on the north side of B1 where there's hardly any crimes on the map.
Hopefully.
Well, not on this one.
Yeah.
Very quick, Chief, one of the other issues that we discussed with the Attorney General was the topic of sex trafficking. We know that in the Portland area, that is a huge thing that's going on, and mostly impact minorities in the community and stuff. Have there been any increase, or have you noticed any of that that's running through or starting to take legs here in Eugene?
We have a sex trafficking problem here, human trafficking problem. It's a tough thing to account for because we don't get reports on it. People don't report that there's a problem with prostitution because it's not on the street. So it's very difficult to know what the trends are. What will happen is an investigation will develop informants into a prostitution operation, and then we'll make a number of arrests, and the arrests themselves would suggest that there's more of it going on, but there isn't. It's kind of like looking at the world through a straw. Whatever the straw sees is what you see. You don't really know what the total picture is. So if we could afford more detectives, then we would know more about what the extent of the problem is.
Okay, perhaps in the organization, as we get tighter and stuff, then we can make sure that that information is shared, because this is the main vein that's running through, and it is a big problem.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you very much for taking time out of your apparently busy schedule tonight with all going on, and I appreciate you coming down and answering questions for teachers and the board. We're going to probably miss it. So you can just come in and from memory, quote all the stats. And, fill us in. All right, so now we're into our bias-based police scoping. The last part of your packet has, again, that same information that was passed out to you back in, well, actually, October or November meeting, and we kind of touched on it, but we didn't get, there's a worksheet, a draft worksheet here that kind of gives you an idea of, the format that we'd like to see, but it is entirely up to the commissioners how we do this. We have to decide whether we want a public forum, whether we want the commission to have hearings, within the commission, have people appear, guests, maybe people who are experts on the topic. It's whatever you want to do, so we can get to this. So in keeping that in mind, I hope we can get to that part of the discussion. And I'll open the floor up to people who have some ideas. Claire?
I don't have a bunch of ideas, but and this may be too much of a parallel track, but the chief has the committee that's working on kind of the particulars of I'm assuming of what's a best practice around the data collection, what data points to be collected, and some of those operational pieces. And I think it'd be important for us to, if it's possible, to get a report. So not just a paper report, but an in-person report from that group, which I understand is advisory to the chief and who may change, some of the things. But I think it'd be important for us to have a meeting that brings those pieces together in a way that we can have a dialogue, and so that we can understand where their recommendation comes from and what is behind the particulars.
Just so I understand, are you asking that we meet as a group with the advisory group that's advising the chief?
Not necessarily the whole group, but if there's a chair, maybe the chair could come, when they've got a work product to present. Now, I'm not necessarily saying now, but when they're closer to having, their work product that they've either given to the chief or they're close to giving to the chief. I'm not sure what the timing's gonna be like. I mean, none of us might know. But a report, and I think the chair would be sufficient. I don't think it needs to be a full.
All right, Chief, did you?
Yeah, we do, that would be an easy thing to do. And we've got a couple people from the committee come here and walk you through the logic with regard to the data points that they've identified. And then it's not the same set that the senior staff is identifying, but you can have access to both those lists if you choose.
And then, and then I think whatever the counterpoint is, so, and maybe you could provide that in terms of if there's another recommendation. So again, so that it can help inform how we look at the policy language and we kind of understand the context in which these things are being recommended.
And Juan Carlos, you had something?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. I think that's important. That's what I really was trying to get at. And I stand corrected on you having your own advisory boards. And I used to assume, in my experience has been that this body has been in some way your advisory as well. But we advise the city council and the city manager. I would recommend that we also have a public hearing and also some kind of panel. The panel to bring experts on the impact and long-term issues with this type of policies. Because the police is asking us to look at different policies in other communities. I think we can learn quite a bit from other communities. So bringing those perspectives will be important. And the forum itself will be good because this is a policy that is already, as far as I know, it's already generating quite a bit of interest in people out there. And I definitely want to make sure that, especially those who have been here a long time and they've experienced or perceived specific bias, that they have an opportunity to present their perspective. And this commission has done a very, very good job in bringing people together for public forums and at least try to bring as many voices as possible. You're not going to attract and bring everyone, but we can go back and say, well, we had the group come in and talk to us, we had a panel, and then we also did a public hearing. That will actually, to me, will seem like we would have done a pretty good job into creating the best possible policy. And lastly, I would like to recommend that this body considers having this policy be reviewed in about a year or two to see how it's working.
Can I ask a clarifying question for your proposal, Juan Carlos?
Yes, ma'am.
So what are you thinking about the timing of the public forum with the panel? Are you thinking after the policies finalized?
I'm going to stop you just there in just a minute, if you don't mind. I hate to cut you off in mid-sentence, but if we're going to really talk about this, we need a motion. So, Claire, you had your idea first. I'd like to, either give you the opportunity to move now, and then Juan Carlos make his motion to, or if we want to step back and let him do his first, that's fine. Either way.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification. So you're trying to get the ideas on the table, but hash them out later?
Well, we need to have something to speak about. And if we're going to do it, we need to have the motion on what it is we're talking, because she's asking clarifying language. We haven't even got a motion, so we need to really focus on what it is we want to do and then get everybody's consent on this. We don't have to, be formal about it, but if I have unanimous consent, that's fine.
So we can put them on the agenda and then later talk about all the details?
Exactly.
I see. Okay.
Go ahead and complete with Juan Carlos.
Okay, you want to go ahead and make that an emotion then, that you had three ideas: a public hearing, a panel of experts to advise us on the impact, and also a body review in a year or two. You want to incorporate
I would like to make a motion that this body consider having a panel that will bring those perspectives and experiences, a public forum that goes with it subsequently, and to also review these policies in about a year or two. Do I have to be specific in the year?
I think you made it a year or two as well. Okay, we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tamara. And so we understand it's a three-part motion requiring a public forum or hearing, a panel of experts to be impaneled to help us make these decisions, and also a body review in a year or two by this commission. Okay, now we have discussion. You can get on to your clarifying.
So,
Thank you.
so are you thinking that, about the timing was what I was asking about? First of all, would the public panel and the public forum be together? Would we have that panel that advises us on the long-term impact at the public forum? Be part of the public forum?
No,
It's two different things is what you're thinking?
When you bring a panel, usually it's to help you make a decision on crafting the actual policy, and the public forum will be to then share it with the rest of the public. Kind of reminds me of the actual policy, in which we obviously spend quite a bit of time on that, but in the end, although it took a long time, I think it's a product that it was pretty okay. So on those type of stages.
So the panel would advise us on our recommendation on the policy?
No, the
I
panel.
understood the impact,
Right.
the impact on them.
Right. So because
okay.
the chief is specifically saying to seek out other policies from other communities, I think it'll benefit this body by bringing those perspectives and experiences. Because if we're going to be recommending something that's really been terrible to another community or other groups, I think it'll be beneficial for this group to know about it as we are crafting those policies.
Okay.
So I wasn't done yet.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So, the timing, I realize that we take as much time as we need, but the timeline that's stated in the materials that's been stated from the beginning is that the policy was needed by the department by March of 2014, that the data points are going to start being collected as a pilot in the summer of 2014. So I have a concern about the timing then, if we're now it's going to be probably at least March before we decide who that panel is, get them here, and then we still have to work on the policy after that. I don't think it's a bad idea, I'm just asking about timing. And then on the public forum, were you thinking after, since that's a separate thing, were you thinking after the policy to inform the public about the data points and the new policy after? So they're
Correct.
two separate, okay. Thank you for allowing me to clarify your.
And I'm glad you mentioned, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad you mentioned the time, but we already lost 1 month, and I think the chief will understand that if we right up to the deadline, but this is very important to do.
Okay, Edward was next in the queue, then Claire, and then I'm putting myself in there.
This may help with the little amount of time we have, but this seems like an obvious opportunity for the Human Rights Commission and the Police Commission to be working together on this, which means we might be able to have some of the HRC folks do some of the lifting in terms of getting the word out for a public forum, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not all upon us. And I think that would add a bit of, it would add an ingredient that some people in the community would be reassured by, that the HRC had a hand in the crafting of this, my opinion.
Okay. And next was, Claire.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate Edward's suggestion. I think that is a good one. In terms of the panel, I'm not sure what their policy is, but the Corvallis Police Department has been collecting data on traffic stops for a number of years now, lots and lots and lots of data. So they have a lot of experience with actually actualizing this process. So they could be, if we were able to encourage someone from that department to come and share with us, that is a resource that's potentially out there. And then I think, my suggestion would be the ACLU of Oregon, which is also working on these issues, and I believe is involved in the body that's recommending to the chief how this plays out. And then perhaps, I don't know if this makes sense, an academic, if there might be someone at the U of O who's been researching this work across the country, or just has some perspective that could be valuable in terms of how these things play out in a community, what kind of impact they either have on the department or what kind of value they bring, could be another possibility.
Okay. I just wanted to interject that in July, this policy will be put into effect, correct? That's when they intend to begin collecting data. So it will have to be this, given to the department in time for training, which would be backing it up a couple of months, probably May or June, or later than June, I would think. And in that case, what we need to do is remember our timeline. We can have all these things, but we need to remember that we need to do it pretty quickly to get this done. So,
Could I just
go ahead.
Give you a couple of details. And what we're preparing is, everything we're preparing is an interim program, interim policy, interim data collection program with a small group of officers that will use it for a year. And then we'll all come back and we'll reevaluate all the pieces of it, the data points, the data collection methods, the policy, and things like that.
Thank you for that clarification. We're in the forming stages here, thank you. Any other discussion on the motion, questions about the motion, discussion? Well, we seem to resolve that pretty quickly. Let's go ahead and hold a vote on the motion. The motion was to form a panel of experts that will advise us on the impact on those groups that will be affected by this, and to hold a public forum or hearing, and lastly, to review it in a year, which apparently the department's going to do already. James?
Yeah, real quick. I mean, this is very ambitious and stuff, and I understand that we've got a crunch time and stuff. Who is going to take the lead
Correct.
in order to put this thing together? And are there going to be more meetings? Because you can't do it, by month to month. That means that you're going to have to hold multiple meetings a month in order to meet the timeline and stuff. So,
If you give me a moment, I had something in mind, but first we need to go ahead and approve the motion.
okay.
Or not.
Okay.
Okay, so let's make a, Jesse, did you want to speak to the motion?
On that, I kind of wonder if we should have more details filled in before we approve the motion, and figure out what we're getting into.
Okay, all right. It's the chair's idea that we might go ahead and form a subcommittee to get these people, volunteers, obviously. I don't want to be in the business of appointing certain people to do something. And we would get people that would want to volunteer, one group perhaps to get a panel together, and one group perhaps to plan the public forum and be ready to report to us at the next meeting as to where it is that we want to, how we want to do this, and give a recommendation to us. So in the February meeting, we should be able to vote on it, maybe hold it in April or May, and get this done. Because you're right, we don't have time. We only meet once a month, and we're not going to get it done. We have to have it done by July, or before July.
Mr. Chairman, I will volunteer to be in the group to bring the panelists together.
Okay. Joe?
Yeah, I'm still kind of unclear on what our relationship to this is. I mean, the department seems to be moving ahead on its own stuff. Are we moving on a parallel track? Are we going to say, okay, the department's doing this and we'll review, or how does the group want to interact with the other ongoing threads? And that's so far hasn't really been made clear. And I think it would be good to have some better clarification on that. I do like the idea of us sponsoring things that are involved in this, but they should be done in a way that helps the department rather than sort of a separate set of events. Is kind of my feeling about it, and I was wondering if we could broaden this particular discussion, maybe get a little more clarity on that.
Yeah, I agree with Joe to that degree. I'm not quite sure on what it is that we're going to be trying to review. And as the chief indicated, that it's going to be a pilot program that's going to be reevaluated after 1 year. Would that be the appropriate time to actually go over it? Because the data and stuff is available at that time. Instead of trying to determine, we can't drive the data, what they're going to be collecting and stuff, So, I'm really kind of confused. If it's a policy that's being developed and not yet implemented, as I understand it, it's a policy that's being developed and it's going to be tested, and then it's going to come back for a review. I think that that would probably be the appropriate time to take a look at it.
Okay. And we had, okay, Tamara, I guess, is next.
I think the chief should probably speak to part of that, but I view this sort of like when the TASER came online as a new tool in the department. And there was an interim policy to allow the tool to be used. It was a time-limited pilot project. You have to have the policy when the tool goes out on the street to dictate how it's going to be used. And then at the, was it 1 year, 1.5 year mark? I can't remember now. Was it a year and a half?
Mm-hmm.
Mark approximately, the data came back that had been collected during that year and a half of use of the tool, and the policy was also, the interim policy was reviewed and revised at that time to become a permanent policy. So it seems a bit similar to that. Do you agree with that one, Carlos?
Yeah.
I kind of appreciate the confusion factor because I've been dealing with the same thing conceptually. What's our role here? How does it intersect with the work that the chief is doing in other places to prepare this? But I think the value of pursuing the suggestions of a panel and a public forum is it's educating us about these issues. And so even if there's an interim policy that comes out and we haven't, let's say we get bogged down and we haven't had a chance to cover it, we're at least informed and able to participate going forward. And then the public hearing, I think, is an opportunity to provide some public education and to hear from the public that, so even if it's a pilot phase, it's going to generate community concern, community interest. And so having a place to kind of vet some of those things on the front end, I think would have some value.
Okay, if I can add mine again one more time, put myself in the queue. I think what's happening here is, to answer Joe's question, that parallel thing kind of hit me as a possibility here, because I think the chief is trying to build a broad coalition of community members to advise him on what it is they want to see in the policy. And that's fine, because we want to get a broad section of the community. The police commissioner's job is to advise the chief on policies that the police department has. So we have kind of a separate mandate from what he's trying to do. He's trying to get input from the community. We have a mandate to approve whatever it is that he is looking at. So we have to put advice into it too. So now he's got the community, he's got the commission, he's got whoever else he chooses to use as a tool to help him form the policy. So we have a responsibility concomitant with the rest of this to provide information to the chief. So where are we going to get that information? From our own personal knowledge, our own personal feelings? Yes, true. We do have, a lot of us have a lot of experience with it. And also from the community. And so the public aspect of them speaking out, we already heard from a group here from LULAC. We heard again tonight from Lily with LULAC. She mentioned she was speaking on their behalf. And so we have other groups out there that I'm sure would love to have input into the process. What we're stuck with, unfortunately, I'm looking at the agenda, and we're so ambitious, we're supposed to be approving the policy at this meeting, so we're not even started yet. So really, that's what I would like to see us do, is to get a subcommittee going on, getting a panel together, and then we have a volunteer, thankfully. And, I don't think we need to incorporate that in a separate motion. I think we can either approve the motion or not tonight, and then we can go ahead and form a subcommittee. Okay? Anybody have any other ideas or questions? I'm open for suggestions.
You call the question.
Go ahead.
No, sorry, Edward. Go ahead.
Just saying that, yes, in part, the HRC and myself as a commissioner here would volunteer to work on the public input forum.
Excellent.
Anybody else have questions?
I don't have a question, but I might be able to add something. The vision I had in developing this timeline and the responsibilities was that we would get a group of academics and community members who've worked in this arena and the ACLU, and we have law enforcement Contacts Commission, which includes a professor from Portland State University that studied this and is in a school where a great deal of this kind of study has gone. So there's a lot of information available to the committee that's identifying the data points. And those folks would be available to come here also and talk with you. My vision is that they would come up with the interim list of data points for us, and we've been working with that. The Police Commission would come up with an interim policy by March so that we can get something in place by July. We have work to do with the union before that's done, and we have training to do and so on. SunGuard needs to finish its work. We believe all that can be done by July. And then we have a year to maybe inform ourselves a little bit more about all this and before we get the data, and then we make a review of the data points, the policy, the data collection, and so on. So in my little world, Police Commission would be able to develop an interim policy in that short time. And it may be that that's not possible. It might be that I just assume responsibility for using the enormous resources that are available to refine pretty safe interim policy that the department could use, much like we did the TASER policy. I hadn't considered that. And then the commission could spend the year learning a great deal more about how racial profiling data collection is done well in the United States. Rather than trying to spend the next few months trying to do a lot of interesting work and probably not getting an interim policy done.
Good point. Now,
Can I ask for a rereading of the wording of the
let me
motion?
get Claire first, Edward, and then you, since you just spoke.
So I know you're just considering that right now and here in real time.
It's all live.
So you might get home and go, wait, what was I suggesting? But, I mean, even if that is the turn that we take, which I think could work too, I would still like to pursue these activities.
Yeah.
It just means we don't have to feel so crunched in terms of getting you something to work with right away. So thank you for thinking of, at least considering that as an alternative scenario.
Okay, then we have Edward, and then Tamara.
Mine was just a question about Juan Carlos' motion. Did it commit us to getting this all done by March?
No.
Okay, so the motion could be exactly what the chief is envisioning. It's just all folded in together over the course of the next year and something, so that we're gathering information from the public and from experts to add to what he's collecting in the pilot project. Yeah?
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and cut off discussion now and go ahead.
Wait, I was in the queue.
Oh,
You run me down.
We're running past our time on this, so I'm gonna, that's the end of the queue.
Okay. So I would like to encourage this body to work to develop the interim policy with thoughtfulness and as much discussion as is necessary, but I would really hate to see this body miss out on weighing in the interim policy because we can't get the job done in the timeline that's needed by the department. That would be a really a shame to see that happen. We should definitely get our work done and get our recommendation in the time that the department needs it, and we'll miss out on weighing in the interim policy. Thanks.
So now we're going to take the vote. Everybody understand the motion? Does anybody need to hear it again? Okay, all in favor of the motion as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. I have two people that volunteered here. I have Juan Carlos and Edward, and Joe is volunteering. So we have three people. Anybody else that'd like to join this?
Put that up there.
Bill?
I'll alter for the panel piece. Subcommittee.
I thought we were
Chairman,
doing
you
one
name
group.
which
Are we
will volunteer for
gonna
what?
do two different subcommittees here? I thought we were doing it in one.
Oh, one, okay,
Okay.
that's fine.
One committee, but we may not all be working on the same event.
Well, no, well, I would think, yeah, you would.
Mr. Chairman, would you mind clarifying, so your interest is on the panel, right?
Right.
Okay, so even though we're gonna be one committee, the interest will be probably, Joe, did you
Either one
volunteer?
is fine. I'll
Okay.
just be happy to help with it.
Got it,
Okay,
thank
so
you.
I have
And Claire and
I
I.
have 4 volunteers to get this together. I think that's enough. We have Edward and Bill and Joe and Juan Carlos. Thank you very
And the Human
much
Rights
for
Commission, too.
offering to serve. We appreciate that, and we will look forward to a report at the next meeting in February so that we can get where we was. Thank you. It's going to be difficult, so we appreciate the work. Chief, you had something you wanted to?
Go ahead. Just a question. Is there something resembling a draft policy in existence at this point, possibly that other communities have done or the like? I mean, in other words, if we're starting to look at this, are there things that we can begin to look at, that are examples to start piecing ideas together from various different examples? Always good to start from something.
Sure. We had 3 drafts in, but I don't think they got down to the details.
You had 3 policies in the October packet, and that's what pulled this policy together.
What they didn't include, though, they couldn't possibly include is the procedure for the data entry, which is the instruction that is left blank in this.
So that's policy 402 that we talked about.
If you go back to the calendar for the month of October and grab the packet, it's going to have those policies.
Okay, month of October. Can do.
Okay, we're into commissioner comments, and I'd like to go around the table, maybe the other way this time. How about we start with you, Juan Carlos? Okay.
Commissioners, it is my pleasure to share with you that for the first time in the state of Oregon, both National Civil Rights Organization, the NAACP, and LULAC will be marching together on January the 20th. And I encourage you to join us. This is, the theme is unity and stand for justice and equality. So I hope you can join us January the 20th at 9 o'clock, 9:30 at the Science Factory right next to Adson Stadium. And you can go on the local NAACP website or info@lulac.org. This is the first time in the history of both organizations that have joined in this state. We're going to be celebrating 1 year since we were activated in this state. March will be our anniversary. So I encourage you to attend, but also to realize why is it that now we have 2 civil rights entities. Thanks.
Jim?
Good meeting. It's almost time to get out of here, so I think I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, everybody.
What he said.
The bicycle police officers wear the regular dark blue uniform. It is hard to see at night for drivers. I really enjoy bike riders who've got very visible. I wear a safety vest if I don't have my safety vest attached to my bike. On the other hand, I've heard many people say, I don't know where he came from. All of a sudden, he was there asking me about that alcohol in my hand. So I understand exactly.
Reversible jackets.
The yin and the yang.
Got reversible jackets, Gene?
And I was watching the Los Angeles County Sheriff resign. He had 5 stars on his uniform like some dictator of a country. I appreciate that. You got the more modest 2-star uniform. I don't know what dictates that, but
He'll come back with 10
We'll give you another
next
star
time.
for that.
Let's get 5. You get a star for every 500 employees.
For every
Sworn
year
on
you've
that.
been sheriff. I mean, for every decade you've
Re-election,
been sheriff.
probably.
Well, again, happy New Year, everyone. Look forward to doing a lot of positive work here in the community and stuff, and continue to repair bridges and build new bridges with the community and then police.
I just want to thank everybody. It's a great meeting.
I'm always amazed at this meeting that I say something and you say something and you say something. And I'm going, yeah, okay, yeah. Whoever's talking seems to have incredible points, and I really appreciate the diversity of everybody's different views, and it is either opening my mind or it's going down the drain. I haven't quite figured out yet, but there's incredible amounts of information. I thank you. And I have a real quick story. I came in there just a few days ago to buy a couple clubs for cars, and I went in there and I said to the gal behind the counter, I said, how's that new software working? She says, how do you know about that software? And I said, well, I got a ride with Officer M, or I use his real name, and it was her first night, and it was really confusing for everybody. And I'm on the police commission, the citizens review board, and she says, great, and I paid with my Visa card. She says, could I see some ID with that?
Doing her job.
Good. So anyway, I even go into the OLCC thing to get alcohol. Well, actually, it's on another card, but I don't get carded, so, yeah, interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't get carded either, and I really don't have anything to say, so Happy New Year, everyone.
So I wanted to share, I got to go on my first ride-along in December with Officer Connor, and she happens to do the beat in my ward, so that was really nice, although it's pretty quiet there apparently, and the River Road area, and so she'll often get pulled off to other things. And I didn't get to do a full 4 hours for various reasons, so I hope to take another opportunity in the future and possibly do a ride-along at the call center, which we did go and visit, and that was pretty neat. And then the other thing I wanted to say here at this commission meeting, this public meeting, is so Jesse serves on the Trang Song Neighborhood Association, and I just want to appreciate the Trang Song Neighborhood Association for their generous attitude towards the new rest stop camps, temporary camping site that's been opened in the Trang Song neighborhood, not too far away from Opportunity Village. And I hope to go to the Trang Song meeting and give that thank you in person, but I just wanted to share that here, that the Neighborhood Association had the nonprofit group that's managing that rest stop come and speak to them, and that made a real big difference. And from what I understand, the neighborhood said, okay, we'll have you guys here and we'll see how this works, and hoping to get some other services for Trang Song that we've been talking about shore it up a little bit, but I just wanted to make that acknowledgement of that neighborhood association and what they've been doing for the community.
Oh, I don't have anything. Thank you.
I thank everybody here that came tonight with an attitude that was very welcoming and also very combined together in the spirit of working together. This is incredibly hard work we're getting ready to do, and I thought the homelessness policies were hard, but this is going to be even harder because we've got so many different people to I don't want to say please, because that's not the right word. I want to say to make them believe that we are trying to reach out to them and to understand how they may feel in certain circumstances. So I appreciate your hard work. If I didn't mention it, Juan Carlos will chair this subcommittee so that we can get this done. Yeah, your motion.
You brought it up.
Volunteer.
I decided you're chairing. You will come back to us and.
I see what left
You'll do you some teaching.
Bob,
Bob, thank you kindly for your hard work and your great leadership. I really appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
It's a month before the next meeting,
Yes.
and I don't know if the department is creating an interim policy or if the police commission is.
I see.
I think the department's going to be doing it, would be my guess.
Well, it's a good point. I think what Joe mentioned earlier is what's going on. We're actually on two parallel tracks here. You're handling what you need to do through your advisory committee, and we're going to tell you what we'd like to see. And in the end, if we don't make it to the end of the track at the station at the same time, you know, you may be already ahead of us and in the station, and we may have to pull in behind you, and that may happen.
But you can also take what we've got.
Yeah.
Okay,
At that
so
point.
will the record show that the police commission doesn't object to the police department preparing an interim policy?
Well, we're going to give our input. That's what we're going to say.
Okay,
I won't go as far to say that we don't object to you forming a policy without our input. You know, we have the responsibility. It has nothing to do with whether we want to or not. It's a responsibility to advise you, so we will give advice. I don't know how much will be done by the time we're done with the committee in February, but I hope we'll be pretty close to knowing what we want to do.
All right, I got it.
Thank you.
Would it be accurate to say, Chief, we don't expect you to wait for us? Is that-
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah,
I understand.
yeah, that would be my suggestion. That'd be my guess. Thank you.
I'm sorry? I don't. Yeah, I have one. I can give you any no, let me write it down.
That's my trick is remember.
Yeah, I'm locking
I don't know the one you're talking about.
It was on the
Yeah, we were just like, I was talking to them. Are we on?